Hi everyone, we will be covering God of High School Final Season Part 3 from chapters 388 to 424. Before we get started, I would like to say thank you for everyone's continued support of this series. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Without further ado, let's dive right in. The next part of God of High School's final season starts on a pleasant morning where we see Mori taking a much-deserved rest after all the crap he's been through during the recent God of High School final tournament. And if you guys remember, his adopted sister, Ahan, has fully recovered from her illness. And it's more or less back to normal for these two kids. Ahan lets her big brother snooze while she cooks some breakfast inside their apartment. She wakes up Mori when she's finished preparing the meal and the two share a nice spread in front of their dining table. It's a completely uneventful day until our heroes hear news from the TV saying that the world government has now declared martial law. But there's no time to worry about that now, as Ahan and Mori take this opportunity to go about their daily lives. Mori asks her little sister what her plans are for today, to which Ahan says she's going back to school. Mori's confused, thinking that all the schools in the country have been shuttered after that whole mess at the God of High School final tournament. But as we find out from Ahan, their school continues its operations, since a few of the students decided to continue their studies there. But it's not the same establishment as it once was. As Ahan puts it, there are now only about 20 to 30 kids enrolled at the place. Ahan changes the subject and asks her big brother what he'll be up to today. She's taken by surprise when Mori tells her he's going out on a date. Later, we learn that Mori is actually going to hang out with the same girl who stuck with him during the events of the God of High School final tournament, the one and only Peach. Peach starts to think Mori has stood her up, but our boy arrives at their designated meetup spot a second later. Some things never change though, as we learn that Peach is still in denial that she has a thing for Mori. More sappy romantic tension happens when our hero compliments Peach about the shampoo she uses, prompting the blonde Nox operative to squeal and give her boy a playful shove. We also learn that Xiaochen actually prepped Peach before meeting Mori. And if you didn't know it by now, Xiaochen is basically an expert in applying makeup, which explains why Peach is glowing right now. The two lovebirds go on their date shortly after, spending the day at a theme park. And for a guy who's literally taken down gods and giants in the past, Mori sure is scared of theme park rides. Yes, even the merry-go-round. On the other hand, Peach gets super annoyed when she finds out that our hero actually treated the recent roller coaster ride as a training exercise in controlling Yoi's weight inside his ear. So much so that Peach gives her boy a much-deserved beating afterwards. On top of that, Mori doesn't know that Ahan has actually played hooky and instead decided to follow him to the theme park to see who he's with. Shortly after, Mori and Peach take a load off on one of the park benches, where our hero asks his date how her hand's feeling after Daewi used his powers to regenerate the entire appendage. Peach says she's doing fine, but she can't help shake off the feeling that Daewi and Xiaochen wasted their efforts on her. But being the good guy that he is, Mori reassures her that they'd put their lives on the line for one of their loved ones. Still, it's not enough to lift Peach's spirits. She really believes that Daewi's powers would have been put to better use somewhere else. Not only that, but our girl's so down that she feels their recent victory over the world government was too costly. Mori changes the subject and invites Peach to be his friend. She gets all bashful, thinking she's not worthy of it, considering that Mori's a literal monkey king and he happens to be a close friend of her organization's supreme leader, Daewi. But as Mori puts it, they went through a lot together in the God of High School final competition, so there's no reason for the two of them to act like a couple of strangers. Peach is touched and starts to cry, sending her boy into a panic. Meanwhile, Ahan starts to regret how she wasted her time snooping around her big brother's business and decides to just head to school anyway. But then she accidentally bumps into Mori. Ahan tries to maintain her disguise, but ultimately fails when she's unable to control her emotions. Mori, on the other hand, is just weirded out when he spots Ahan cussing and shaking her fists in the air as she makes her exit. In any case, Mori returns to Peach and continues their date. Later that evening, Ahan comes back to their apartment where Mori, Daewi, Peach, and Xiaochen surprise her with a long overdue party. Mori introduces each one of them to Ahan before raising a toast to his sister's complete recovery. Our hero gets so hyped that he tells Daewi that he hopes Mira would be able to come join them the next time they all get together. Daewi shares the same sentiment and even adds Mori Huey to their wish list. Daewi then starts reminiscing about the last time they were together like this, as Mori insists that there's still a chance the whole gang can patch things up again. And as for Mori Huey, Mori reassures Daewi that they're never going to forget him. Meanwhile, Ahan is weirded out that her big brother has friends in high places, such as Daewi and Mira. Daewi then approaches her and thanks Ahan for always taking care of Mori. She tries to downplay her part, but Daewi tells her that she's the reason Mori had been protected from the world government's manhunt this whole time. In turn, Ahan sheepishly asks Daewi to continue taking good care of Mori. Morning comes and we see that Peach, Xiaochen, and Ahan are sleeping like babies after a night of junk food and sodas. On the other hand, Daewi and Mori are already up and about. Daewi asks his best friend if he's sure he doesn't want to say goodbye to Ahan, to which Mori says they've said everything that needed to be said yesterday. And from there, Daewi asks Mori if he's ready to go, as our two heroes walk out of the apartment. Later, in the city of New Shanghai, world government agents start to go on code red after the Wi-Fi facility they're in charge of guarding is suddenly ambushed. We soon learn that the perpetrators are none other than Mori and Dewi. Mori easily dispatches several world government executives after bursting through the facility's walls. A few of the scrubs try to go for a long-range counterattack, but they're forced to literally get on their knees when Dewi arrives and activates his gravity 10 times ability. On the other hand, Dewi makes it known that the world government has started to become more organized, so the two of them have to strike harder, faster, and with no mercy from here on out. Regardless, our boys easily take down the whole facility, and Dewi asks if Mori's ready to hit the next target. We soon learn that this isn't the first Wi-Fi facility they've destroyed, as God of High School takes us to a flashback from 2 days ago. Here we see Daewi and Mori coming up with an initial plan for their next move. Daewi proposes that they take out Mujin first. On the other hand, Mori wants to get Mira back into the fold before taking out the world president. Our two heroes get into an argument about this, as Daewi tries to make his best friend see reason. After all, tactics and strategy have never been Mori's strong suit. As Daewi puts it, they'd end up in a pinch if they go with Mori's plan, considering that Mujin might attack them before they could convince Mira to join their crusade. Still, Mori's not having any of it, as he insists that they can't get their revenge without Mira on their side. It's a sweet plan, but not a smart one. Still, Daewi continues to argue his point and explains that Mujin actually has 3 main pillars that allow him to retain power in the current world order. There's Generation X, also known as the babies born after Ragnarok, who are pretty much the next step in human evolution. These are also the same people that the world government have been continually drafting to their ranks this whole time. Then there's Project Wi-Fi, which happens to be Mujin's very own weapon that allows him to steal borrowed powers from almost anyone he wishes. And then, of course, there's Mujin's army of executives on his side. Daewi explains that Mujin and the world government would inevitably crumble if they decide to take care of these 3 things first. We then get glimpses from what happened after this argument, as Mori and Daewi proceeded to systematically sabotage several Wi-Fi stations all over the world government's territory. And if you're wondering how our two heroes ultimately settled their debate, well, they did it in the most gentlemanly way possible, with a game of rock, paper, scissors. In the present, our favorite genius inventor Beck analyzes the cybernetic arm that our heroes were able to retrieve from Mujin during the events of the God of High School final tournament. Beck is well aware that the world president had this thing developed for the specific purpose of countering Daewi's godly abilities, but the genius knows that this cybernetic appendage is more than that. Beck doesn't know the specifics, but he's pretty sure that Mujin is after something else. Somewhere else, Mujin wakes up from a nightmare, and we see that he has a new cybernetic arm. A flashback reveals that this is an entirely new, upgraded version of the one that Mori and the others stole. It was developed by the same world government scientists, and as the head researcher puts it, this one is exponentially more powerful than the old model. The only downside is that attaching it to Mujin might prove harmful to his body. Of course, Executive P takes issue with this, but Mujin insists that he's ready to get this brand spanking new arm attached to his body right away. In the present, Mori kicks the snot out of several world government agents. He then has a flashback from the night of the party they had at his and Ahan's apartment, where his younger sister approached him on the rooftop. Ahan knew that Mori was planning to leave with Daewi to bring in the fight to Mujin and the world government. Ahan asks if she could join, but Mori firmly denies her request, given that he knows their upcoming mission is way beyond his little sister's pay grade. Ahan has no choice but to respect her brother's choice. In turn, she gets all glum and asks Mori what she is to him. Long story short, Mori emphasizes the fact that Ahan is and will always remain as his sister. He even compares her to someone named Tang Sanzang, the man our hero credits as responsible for giving him a reason to live. In the present, Mori's flashback gives him even more motivation to fight off the world government and ultimately accomplish their mission, as our hero vows that he's going to accept himself for what he is. Daewi joins in on the action, and our two heroes successfully bring down another Wi-Fi facility shortly after. From there, Daewi asks Mori if he's ready for their next target. The boys fist bump and continue their work. Our two heroes soon find themselves walking in the middle of a janky town in search of someone. It doesn't take long before a couple of shady slum dwellers approach the duo and immediately try to start some smoke with our boys. However, a man with long hair and a nice suit suddenly arrives on the scene before things could escalate. The man tells our two heroes that his boss is waiting for them, and we soon find out that this bigwig happens to be none other than former six-member and notorious loan shark, Dusik Kim. Kim has since established this raggedy slumland as his base of operations, and the man soon comes face to face with Daewi and Mori. It takes Kim a minute before he realizes that the blue-haired boy in front of him is the one and only Monkey King, Jin Mori. In any case, Kim is not one for small talk, so he does away with the pleasantries and asks our heroes the purpose of this visit. Mori replies by telling him that they need Kim's help. Our hero then explains that he wants to hire Kim and his firm to serve as Ahan's bodyguard in case Mujin and the world government go after her. Kim is initially hesitant to take on the job, but just as it's sure that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, you know the man can't turn down a good offer. So Kim immediately changes his tune when Mori says that they're willing to pay him 60 billion won for his services. It's a done deal, and Kim cements it with a handshake. Well, not really, because the notorious loan shark has one more condition before he formally accepts our hero's deal. To be specific, Kim wants Mori and Dewi to bring him the heads of a couple world government agents stationed in Beijing. Dewi and Mori agree to this stipulation and soon make their way to handle this task. On the other hand, Kim's right-hand man advises him to not trust our heroes, since he knows they don't have the 60 billion won to pay Kim. On the other hand, Kim knows that, which is why he sent them to deal with the two world government agents. Curiously, Kim's sidekick notices how his boss's recent handshake with Mori has left a bruise on the man's arm. Meanwhile, Kim comments on how crazy it is that Daewi and Mori are planning on bringing down the world government by themselves. Don't get it twisted though, it's not like Kim thinks our heroes don't have the power to do it. In fact, it's the opposite. Kim is well aware that Daewi and Mori don't even need to team up to destroy Mujin and the world government. Either Daewi or Mori alone would be more than enough to accomplish this. Later, Ipio gets a call from one of the two executives Kim tasked our heroes to assassinate. Ipio orders them to not get into a one-on-one confrontation with our heroes at all costs. But the executive, who happens to look like a young prepubescent girl, ignores their boss's orders and says that they'll handle things in Beijing the way they want. After the phone call, Ilpio's assistant and number one fan, Executive 1, dumps some exposition about these two world government agents. What we learn is that they're from the Morning Crows, a group who was on Mandok Sang's side during the Great War before the world government captured and turned them into executives. More than that, we also find out that these two individuals have unique abilities derived from Tam. As a result, they have different powers compared to the other world government executives out there. Executive 1 remarks that these two stubborn employees might end up surprising them by defeating Daewi and Mori. Not long after, our heroes find themselves in New Beijing, as they raid a world government facility to take care of these two executives. A couple unnamed world government agents immediately spot the duo and run the other way. But they end up getting literally sliced to bits when the same girl from earlier reprimands the random dudes for shirking their duties to the world government. God of High School finally introduces us to Daewi and Mori's current targets. The young girl happens to be Executive Lost number 5, while the other one is Executive Lost number 6. Oh, and they have a sweet-looking giant wolf named Rex, too. Executive Lost number 6 uses his tablet to identify the facility's intruders. The other unnamed government agent furiously attacks number 6 for killing the other agent, breaking his tablet in the process. The agent barrages number 6 with a few punches when number 6 strikes back and uses his Tam's ability to devour the agent. On the other hand, at least we get a bit of background as to Lost number 5's motivation, as he comments on how the world government basically turned him and Lost number 6 into lab rats after they captured them in the past. Meanwhile, even Daewi doesn't have any idea what these nutty world government agents are doing, what with all the infighting between them going on. But God of High School finally gets back on track and gives us what we've been waiting for, an action-packed confrontation between our heroes and their two targets. Lost number 5 and 6 waste no time to throw hands, as they lunge at our heroes without saying a word. Meanwhile, Executive 1 continues his exposition dump to shed more light about Lost number 5 and 6's origin story. It turns out that not only did they capture the two after the conclusion of the Great War, but the world government performed a ton of human experiments on them to make sure they'd become a part of their ranks. One goes on to explain that Mujin himself has a special interest in the two, especially Lost number 5's power to absorb other people's borrowed power. In fact, we learned that Mujin actually derived Project Wi-Fi from Lost number 5's powers. Somewhere else, Daewi and Lost number 5 have themselves a duel, while one comments about how Lost number 5 is the only unit they have that could be considered as the Jade Emperor's natural enemy. On the other hand, no amount of glazing is enough to make Ilpio believe all this talk about Lost number 5 being Daewi's natural enemy. As he puts it, that concept only applies if there's a reasonable difference in the level of power between any concerned parties. Long story short, Ilpio knows that not even Lost number 5 has a chance to beat someone of Daewi's caliber. And well, he's right, because in the middle of the facility in New Beijing, Daewi has just made Lost number 5 eat concrete without so much as lifting a finger. Fair play to Lost number 5 though, because this girl has got spunk. She refuses to be beaten and instead runs her mouth, telling Daewi that he just left himself exposed using his powers on her. Lost number 5 thinks she's slick, as she sicks Rex on Dewi while he's busy listening to her trash talk. But what this girl doesn't know is that she's not the only one who has a trusty pet, as Heite gives the giant wolf a quick nibble on its nape. This causes Rex to instantly get knocked out, while Lost Number 5 shuts her mouth when she notices that her otherwise intimidating pet wolf was just taken down by a cute green monster the size of a Shiba Inu. And you gotta hand it to Heite, because this best boy is an absolute savage, as he adds insult to injury by taking another cute little nibble on the already downed wolf just to show Lost Number 5 how much of a scrub she is. This forces Lost Number 5 to use her absorption powers on Rex, which effectively turns the giant beast into her ultimate armor. Like before, Lost Number 5 grandstands and tries to hit Dewi with a powerful energy slash. Again, this just ends up becoming more proof that she's nothing compared to the Sage of the East, as Dewi easily blocks her attack with his natural barrier technique before walloping her with his natural inertia ability. In turn, Lost Number 5 gets cheeky and sneaks in her tam on Dewi's left arm. She thinks she's got her hero on the ropes and starts running her mouth again, blabbing about how she possesses the strongest armor in the world. But once more, Dewi puts Lost Number 5 in her place when he effortlessly gets rid of the tam on his body, as he casually walks toward his opponent. Now, Dewi's not really the kind to trash talk, but it's super satisfying when he tells Lost Number 5 how, despite her best efforts, not a single one of her weak techniques has even managed to land a scratch on her hero. In fact, we find out Dewi just gave her a free shot just now, since our boy wanted to test out the Sage's robe. And just to drive the point home, Dewi tells her how pathetic she is. On the other hand, Lost Number 5 gets all aggressive after this and tries to go all out on Dewi. The Sage of the East has had enough of this showboating scrub, so he simply tells Heite to take care of her. Heite blasts Lost Number 5 with a single energy beam meant as a warning shot, and it's enough to make her lose the will to fight. All of a sudden, Lost Number 5 hears a voice inside her head. She instantly figures out that this is coming from a failsafe that Mujin placed in her body in case she stops being useful to the world government. We also get the reveal that Mujin did this way back in the past when he collected physical data from Lost Number 5. In the present, she figures out that she's just been screwed over by the world president, and there's nothing she can do about it but scream, emote, and wonder what the hell Mujin is trying to become. Somewhere else, the world president is about to get his brand new cybernetic arm grafted to his body. Back in New Beijing, Dewi tries to save Number 5 with his natural inertia ability. Lost Number 5 gets knocked out, prompting Dewi to check what's happening with this mouthy scrub. He instantly notices that the tam has consumed her entire body. Meanwhile, Lost Number 5 stays true to her nature and keeps on talking trash, cursing Daewi and Mujin until the tam chows down on her so hard that there's not even a body to bury after it's done. Daewi soon realizes that Lost Number 5 used to be a part of the Morning Crows, and although he just made her look like a total amateur during their bout, Daewi can't help but be concerned that Mira is rolling with these kinds of people. But Daewi ultimately brushes it off and gets his head in the game, because right now, he's more concerned about his best friend, Mori, who's currently about to throw down with Lost Number 6. In addition, Daewi comes to the conclusion that he and Mori can handle their own against Mubong, but not Mira. More than that, he remarks that the easiest way to solve their problem would be to allow Mori to get back to prime shape. Not too far away, Lost Number 6 senses that Lost Number 5's energy signature has completely disappeared from the vicinity. He realizes that Mujin must have screwed the both of them over, but ultimately brushes it off to focus on his bout with Mori. On the other hand, Mori notices that Lost Number 6 is different from all the other executives they've faced in the past, and it's not even the tam coursing through his opponent's body. In any case, the two warriors clash, and Mori is taken by surprise when Lost Number 6 easily parries and counters his initial strike with pure martial arts alone. Lost Number 6 gets so confident that he even gives Mori a quick martial arts lesson while peppering in some insults here and there. Lost Number 6's lesson ends when he sends Mori flying with an elbow strike to our boy's face. Not too far away, Daewi senses that his best friend is in trouble, mainly because Mori's body has become a complete mess after suffering the side effects of the Holy Grail and his Jaebong Chim techniques. Daewi goes on this whole analogy about how Mori's like a passenger with the flu riding a bus. To cut a long story short, Daewi concludes that the only way he can protect himself from Lost Number 6 is through impeccable positioning on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Mori gingerly touches his right ear and deliberates on whether he should bust out Yoi to end this bout quickly. He ultimately decides to just stick with martial arts after reminding himself how it served him well in the past, during his previous battles with several other world government executives. In reply, Lost Number 6 states the obvious and tells Mori that your whole body is the weapon when it comes to martial arts. He then restarts another clash, all the while giving our hero another lesson, as Lost Number 6 body checks Mori with a technique simply called Go before rocking him with another move called Gu, which happens to be a cracking wrist strike directed at Mori's chin. Lost Number 6 keeps up the pressure with a combo strike, and although our hero manages to sneak in a high kick when he finds an opening, Mori ends up taking another hit again when lost number 6 easily grabs his leg, pulls our boy close, and smashes him with another elbow strike he calls Master Cut, one beat. From above, Dewi watches the bout unfold and gives props to lost number 6's martial arts mastery. So much so that Dewi notices that Mori's opponent is a bona fide master when it comes to technical proficiency in the fine art of fisticuffs. Below, lost number 6 commends Mori's ability to repeatedly get back up in spite of taking a solid beating. He continues to barrage our hero with more strikes, starting with a body shot before transitioning into a full-blown assault that Mori has no answer for. Still, lost number 6 notices something strange, that although he currently has the upper hand, striking Mori is unlike hitting an ordinary person. Lost number 6 goes on about how it feels like this sensation isn't coming from Mori's weight, it's actually coming from his mass. And even though this attempt at referencing the laws of physics makes little sense at best, lost number 6's point is that hitting Mori feels like he's hitting something incredibly heavy, like a boulder. Lost number 6 realizes that the reason behind this must be the same thing Mori was reaching for earlier inside his right ear, Yoi. Meanwhile, Mori gets all hyped and prepares for another clash with his opponent. And unlike lost number 5, lost number 6 actually seems like a good guy, as he's more focused on helping Mori realize his desire of being a great warrior instead of talking empty smack at his opponents. The two combatants get back to business right away, with Mori once again forced to go on the defensive, while lost number 6 attempts to catch him with another combo. Mori notices that lost number 6 has been implanted with Tam and guesses none other than Mandoc was the one responsible for this gruesome procedure. This allows Mori to realize that lost number 6 is physically superior to him. Still, our hero remains resolute in not busting out Yoi. Instead, our hero reminds himself of the true essence of martial arts, which is physical skill and the fact that it was created so that the weak can beat the strong. So, Mori ultimately decides to trust his instincts and stick to the fundamentals. This allows him to finally land one of his Rei Taekwondo kicks right on his opponent's face, which rocks lost number 6 so hard that his Tam starts acting up and forms an armor around his body. He eventually controls himself back up and does not use his Tam's powers, while Daewi and Mori are surprised that he held himself back. Regardless, lost number 6 recovers. Mori takes another beating, which culminates with a corkscrew punch that almost drops our hero. But Mori powers through the assault, as lost number 6 cocks back his fist and prepares for another clash. Mori's opponent lunges at him once again, but our boy's got this master martial artist checked, as Mori remembers one of his greatest assets, the ability to instantly copy his opponent's moves. Specifically, our hero catches lost number 6's fist before giving him a taste of his own medicine in the form of the one-beat technique. It lands cleanly on lost number 6's jaw. Meanwhile, the narrator pops in to tell us that Dewi has just remembered a hypothesis he once came up with. That is, if Mori continues growing until he reaches the level of Jihonda Song, his best friend is going to turn out even more powerful than when he was in his original prime. In the middle of the battlefield, Mori's one-beat technique stays true to its name, because it only took that one hit to bring down lost number 6. Mori and Dewi have successfully taken down the Beijing branch of the world government, and also completed Dusik Kim's condition, which makes him work under Mori Jin. Later, the world government's leaders attend a summit to discuss the current crises happening all over their territories. We find out that Mujin's underlings are now starting to doubt his leadership capabilities. What's more is we learn that the world government's territories right now have pretty much turned into something similar to a third world country. For one, the blows that Daewi and Mori delivered to the world government during their crusade have done a number on their infrastructure. No one's running their garbage dumps and their public facilities, and the overall state of hygiene in their territories have taken a disastrous dip. This all stems from the fact that the non-borrowed power users who used to live in the world government's territories have migrated en masse to other places where rules aren't as rigged against non-borrowed power users. On top of that, this mass migration has led to food shortages within world government-controlled lands. This hilarious series of events makes the World Summit attendees conclude that it's time to consider finding a new leader. But not everyone's on board with this proposal. As another old pruny council member puts it, doing that would be extremely dangerous, considering that the world government is currently in the middle of a war. Surprisingly enough, we also discover that Ipio is present during this summit, most likely as a proxy for Mujin himself. Ipio urges the other council members that they should retain Mujin, since his approval ratings are through the roof. Not only that, but the world government citizens are actually hoping that this would lead to another miracle similar to what Mujin did 17 years ago. An unnamed council member drops a truth bomb in response to Ilpio's position though, and she makes a good point. Yes, Mujin might be a war hero, but he's turned into nothing more than a common dictator these days. Another council member comes up with the bright idea to ambush their enemies. This is immediately shot down, since everyone knows that it won't work against them. And when they find out that these so-called guerrilla warriors are just made up of a couple of dudes, namely our boys Daewi and Mori, All the council members could do is shut their mouths and realize how powerless they are in the face of demigods. On the other hand, the only named member of the council, Johann Yonef, proposes a different approach to deal with the Daewi-Mori alliance. Instead of war, he believes that approaching their enemies for a parley would be much more beneficial for everyone. After all, Yonef knows that our heroes only want two things: to take out Mujin and give non-borrowed power users guaranteed rights within the world government-controlled territories. On top of that, we learn that Yonef actually agrees with the idea of giving non-borrowed power users equal rights. And it's also during this World Summit where we learn from Ipio that Yonef happens to be a top candidate to become the next world president. In any case, things get eerily similar to the real world when this whole meeting devolves into a screaming match between the council members. On the other hand, Ipio easily figures out the fact that nearly all of these geezers aren't really worried about the world government's citizens. They're just worried about losing their own positions of power. Ultimately, one of the members asks Ipio where Mujin is right now, and we find out that he's at the National Cemetery paying tribute to an as-yet unidentified grave. Somewhere else, Dewi resumes Mori's training, telling his best friend to try hitting a tree with his recoilless kick technique without activating his Jin Mori form. Our hero does so. It only seems like Mori was just able to shake off the tree's pine cones, but Dewi checks the tree, gives it a knock, and we learn that Mori's kick actually managed to pulverize the poor tree. Next, Dewi tells his best friend to perform another recoilless kick on another tree, but this time with his Jin Mori form activated. Mori does this as he's told and instantly, unintentionally commits deforestation when he strikes the tree. Dewi takes in all of the data he's gathered from watching Mori, which allows him to come up with an entirely new approach to our hero's training. In not as many words, Dewi proposes this training regimen that would ultimately allow Mori to quote-unquote go back and forth between being a noob and a master. Simply put, this would allow Mori to progress and level up faster compared to his usual training routine. However, Mori's not entirely convinced if this is going to work, since he knows his body's already messed up from poking himself with too much Jamong-chim. Dewi, on the other hand, truly believes that, sure, chances are super low that Mori could get back to his prime given his current state. But as the Sage of the East puts it, it really doesn't matter if he reaches that level again or not. What's important is that the higher our hero's level gets, the easier it would be for them to accomplish their main mission of putting Mujin in an early grave and reuniting with Mira. Oh, and if you're one of those nutty, overzealous environmentalists, don't worry about Mori destroying an entire forest earlier, because Dewi uses his sage abilities to literally bring it back to life. Not only that, but Dewi crafts a totem in front of them, which he then uses to give Mori his next lesson. Dewi tells his best friend to use the totem as a target. Mori thinks this is a crappy test, but he changes his tune when Dewi clarifies that he doesn't just want him to wallop the totem. He specifically wants our hero to strike the microscopic statue of Heite he placed on top of it. Oh, and he can't use martial arts for this one either. Mori has to use Yoi. That's because according to Dewi, remastering the magical staff is part of Mori's training to relearn everything in his proverbial skill tree. As of now, Mori has only mastered Re-Taekwondo. He still has Gyeongdaewon and Yoi to deal with. And since Mori Jung pretty much stole Gyeongdaewon, it's best that our boy focuses on the magical staff for now. Dewi urges Mori to use Yoi the way he wants to, since that would bring our hero closer to bringing back his skills wielding this magical weapon. And as Dewi puts it, if a clone like Mori Huey could do it, of course the original Mori can as well. Dewi then tells his best friend to get to work while he gathers some intel on their next target. His whole speech has Mori hyped up and motivated. Before leaving, Dewi watches his best friend work hard to hit the Heite statue with Yoi, all the while relishing the idea that it would be too late for Mujin how much he messed up once Mori regains mastery of all his skills. Down on the ground, a mysterious girl approaches Mori while he's in the middle of swinging his magical rod around. Mori remains focused on his training in the meantime. He does everything to try and hit the little Heite statue on top of the totem pole. Our hero tries poking it and swinging at it to no avail. Things eventually get so bad for Mori that his frustration gets the better of him, and our hero ends up enlarging Yoi and just straight up smashing the totem pole like a caveman. But this pole is magic. It simply flails around as if it were made of rubber and resets its position. Mori tries again and hits the totem pole on its left side, but it just deflects Yoi and makes him spin around in circles. In fact, our hero gets so angry that he forgets the whole point of the training exercise and just starts busting out some Re-Taekwondo kicks on the totem pole. Mori eventually regains his composure and starts deliberating the best approach to finish this exercise. As he puts it, he's been too focused on controlling Yoi's weight this whole time that hitting his target has become a whole other problem. This allows Mori to come to the realization that he actually never focused on precision even when he was in his prime, instead just hacking away with raw strength alone whenever he's met by a problem. So our hero closes his eyes and tries to focus, but Mori being Mori, he ends up falling asleep. Our boy suddenly wakes up, however, when the mysterious girl from earlier walks up to Mori and asks him what he's doing. Mori tells her that he's training with his staff and gets curious about this girl when she's able to spot the tiny Heite statue on top of the totem pole. In turn, the girl asks Mori if she could try hitting it with his staff. Our hero adjusts Yoi's weight to make it as light as possible before handing it to her. But Mori realizes he miscalculated the adjustment when the girl almost dislocates her shoulders after grabbing the magical staff. Mori tries to jump in, but she says she's fine. The girl cracks her neck to prepare to hit the Heite statue before activating muscle power to allow her to lift Yoi. From there, the girl starts putting on a show for Mori while giving him a lesson about using heavy weapons such as this. As she puts it, it's not strength that matters here, it's centrifugal force. And it's not like she's just blowing smoke out of her butt, because the girl shows Mori what's what when she effortlessly strikes the tiny Heite statue. The girl's free lesson isn't over too, as she hands Yoi back to Mori and busts out her own retractable staff. This time, the girl doesn't just hit the Heite statue, she slices it in half. Mori is super impressed and asks her what's the secret behind her technique. She replies by telling her hero that it's all about a sense of unity. All he needs to do is keep practicing until the staff feels like it's a part of your own body. Mori gets even more curious about this unnamed person when she tells him how she could easily tell he's a fighter who mainly relies on kicks from the way he walks and shifts his weight. The girl adds that martial artists like this usually have a more difficult time mastering staff weapons. But she's forced to bid Mori goodbye before he could ask her more questions when she senses her grandpa nearby. The girl runs away and soon reunites with her grandpa. We then get the reveal that these two travelers used to belong to Neo-Nox and the NHA. The girl commiserates with her grandpa, but the old man reassures her everything's cool. After all, the NHA had gone down the crapper the moment Maddox took over this organization. But the biggest reveal here is when we find out that this same girl inherited the late Haoyang Seo's blessings. Not only that, but this also makes her the rightful heir to the NHA. Somewhere else, Mujin has a meeting with the world government's council members. He insists on reclaiming Seoul, but everyone else, even P, knows this is not the best decision. Considering their ongoing war against the Daewi Mori alliance has turned their territory into a cesspool. Still, Mujin insists, telling everyone that a sacred land known as the Coex Underground Mall is lying under half of the Yoi fragment in the middle of the sea. After the meeting, Mujin explains to P that reclaiming Seoul would be the start and end of all their problems. And then we get another big reveal when we learn that the girl from earlier and her grandpa were actually headed for Mujin's stronghold. They arrive at the world president's inner sanctum, and the girl introduces herself as the heir to Haoyang So. On the other hand, Mujin refers to her as something else. To the world president, this same girl happens to be the last of Generation X. Meanwhile, Mori takes the lessons he learned from the girl's demonstration and finally accomplishes his training exercise's goal of striking that little Heite statue on top of the pole. Not just that, our boy slices it off clean. Mori celebrates the win but stops moments later when another totem pole rises from the ground right beside the first one. We then get the reveal that our hero didn't actually manage to slice off the tiny Heite statue. Truth is, the girl from earlier already did that, and Mori just knocked its top half away. This prompted the second totem pole to appear. But as you can already tell, Mori's got the whole gist of this training exercise, so it doesn't take him much effort to slice off the second Heite statue, for real this time. And before he realizes, our hero has managed to hit his goal numerous times, as several spent totems and slice off Heite statues litter the ground not long after. Dewi soon arrives to see his pupils work. He commends Mori, who surprisingly asks him for a one-on-one duel. And not just any sparring match either. Mori wants to take on his best friend in his serious mode. Now, Dewi knows that's a stupid idea, since he can easily kick Mori's monkey butt in a second if he went all out in this duel. So he proposes an alternative. They can have their duel, and Dewi will even the playing field by only using his right hand. If our hero manages to force Dewi to use his left hand, then Mori wins. Mori accepts this and the two warriors get down to business. Mori opens with a recoilless kick, but Dewi easily repels it with his inertia ability, which sends Mori flying. Our hero then attempts to catch Dewi unaware with a Yoi strike. It almost works and Dewi is forced to take their duel a bit more seriously when the magical rod almost hits him in the face. Still, no points for Mori, because the Sage of the East manages to block Yoi when Mori expands it. Still, Dewi commends his best friend's efforts. Mori then tries to divert Dewi's attention with another Yoi strike, while our hero goes in for another Rei Taekwondo kick. And hey, the teacher becomes the student and all that, as Mori is able to check the holes in Dewi's game. Specifically, that he can only use his natural force abilities one at a time. And two, Dewi's body is defenseless whenever he's using one of his natural force abilities. Mori proceeds to apply the lessons he learned from the mysterious girl from earlier as the bout goes on. Our hero becomes more proficient in controlling Yoi as he focuses on the quality of the force, not the quantity. And although not a single one of his strikes hits Daewi, their current clash allows our hero to find an opening in the Sage of the East defenses and creatively use the Monkey King's armor suits to bind Daewi and restrict his movements, a trick he learned from Lost number 5. But Daewi's not going down so easily. In turn, he summons his Sage's robe to free himself from the armor suit trap before attempting to give Mori a cracking right straight to the face. No points though, because Mori's too quick. Even Daewi is surprised that his best friend's able to dodge his punch. Not only that, but Daewi notices how his attack mysteriously veered off course mid-swing. On the other hand, Mori's fantastic maneuver allows him to counter with a jackknife kick that Daewi blocks with his left hand. So Mori wins the duel. Our hero gets super hyped, while Daewi realizes that he made Yui heavier for a second and dodged his punch to the side during their final clash. On top of that, Mori made Yui lighter and used inertia to land his winning strike against him. As Daewi tells himself, that skill is extremely difficult because you have to control the weight of Yui in a really short period of time. Our boy's not bitter though. He's actually proud that Mori's still unpredictable in spite of the fact that he's not in his prime anymore. Of course, Daewi takes this opportunity to mess with his best friend, as he tells Mori he still lost their duel due to the fact that a lot of pine cones fell from the trees in the nearby forest during their duel, indicating Mori still hasn't completely mastered economy of movement. Somewhere else, at the border of New Korea, we see an entire herd of non-borrowed power users attempting to flee world government territory for better pastures. A kid named Paul cries to his mom about leaving their home, but the lady sets him straight when she explains how crappy it is for non-borrowed power users to live under the thumb of the world government. But then, their evacuation is cut short when they spot a fleet of carrier planes flying above the skies of New Korea. And it's here we find out that the world government has begun their planned invasion of this territory. While this is happening, World Government Council member Johan Yonef takes to the streets to denounce this ongoing war. On the other hand, the invasion's mastermind, Mujin, is currently on a recruitment tour to draft more bodies he can use for this war effort. And say what you will, but Mujin is what you'd call a master salesman. He even rips off James Montgomery Flagg's iconic I Want You poster to further convince world government citizens to join his war. Meanwhile, Ipio remarks how everything is going as he had originally surmised, because Mujin has successfully spun the narrative so that the world government's people fully buy into the idea that Daewi and Mori are public enemy number 1. This gives the world president a huge advantage. Back at the New Korean border, world government paratroopers are dropped into enemy territory to proceed with their invasion. We learn that they're equipped with Wi-Fi, as world government headquarters activates it to allow the soldiers to gain wings as they fall through the skies of New Korea. On a side note, these wings actually come from another unnamed executive with pink hair who possesses a borrowed power called Kairos. In fact, this random executive is surprised when he finds out that Project Wi-Fi has just shared his borrowed power to the world government paratroopers. Back at the border, several of Mujin's soldiers get picked off by projectiles before they could even land. One of the troopers attempts to get the enemy forces coordinates from world government headquarters, but they soon find out that the enemy doesn't have any anti-aircraft guns at their disposal. The truth is even more embarrassing. It turns out that they're not being shot at by artillery guns, it's just a single dude throwing pebbles at them. Except this is no ordinary guy, it's actually Dusik Kim, and he's flinging these tiny pieces of stone at supersonic speeds. Still, several of the deployed paratroopers are able to land. One of them, a guy named Captain Denisvich from the world government's 1st Airborne Squad, even manages to drop right in front of Paul and her mom. The non-borrowed power users become terrified when the soldier approaches them. Somewhere else, the World Government Council is having another one of their shady meetings. We find out that they fully turned their backs on Mujin, so they plan on letting his dumb war effort continue and eventually swoop in when his approval rate goes down. To aid in this initiative, the council uses their data farm to release anti-Mujin propaganda, and ultimately, they plan on installing Yonef as the next world president once they've dealt with the current one. We immediately learn the message that the world government sent the citizens of their territories, and it's a big one, because we find out that the council has leaked footage of the true events that happened at the tail end of the Great War from 17 years ago. Specifically, the one where Mujin took out Jin Tai-jin. Back in New Korea, world government troops begin assaulting unwitting citizens with their Wi-Fi assisted weaponry. There's some consolation here at least, as we find out that Project Wi-Fi is only at 70% power due to Mori and Dewi's recent sabotage missions. Still, the world government thinks this is more than enough to destroy New Korea, so they proceed with their mission, summoning titans in the middle of the city to get the job done. However, the world government's Wi-Fi weapons soon encounter a hitch when soldiers begin losing their connection to headquarters. The head of Project Wi-Fi recognizes this as a consequence of Daewi and Mori destroying the stations in New Beijing and New Shanghai. But, as he puts it, they've got other options. Back at the border, Denisvich receives word about their choppy Wi-Fi signal and in order to initiate something called Protocol C. We then learn that Protocol C involves turning world government troops into suicide bombers, as Denisvich orders about 100 of his troops to blow themselves up. What's even worse is when we learn that these soldiers belong to the world government's advanced forces, which are mostly made up of non-borrowed power users working for the world government. As the head of Project Wi-Fi puts it, they were meant to be cannon fodder this whole time. Plus, they have so-called big guns, which are revealed to be people incubating inside the facility's containment chambers. Back in New Korea, the sovereign territory finally sends in their own troops to quell the invading forces. This unit is led by Xiao Chen and, weirdly enough, Ahan. The two women and Daewi's Nox troops proceed to rescue New Korea's citizens in the middle of the world government's siege. Meanwhile, at the border, a few random non-borrowed power users attempt to accost Denisvich to help Paul and his mom escape. Of course, the blonde captain easily murders these poor dudes. And Denisvich is so racist that he even goes topless when he starts feeling icky after the non-borrowed power users grabbed him. He then gives his men the order to execute any non-borrowed power user they find, as he prepares to murder Paul and his mom. But then, he notices a pebble zip past him. Denisvich turns around to see Dusik Kim, who's ready to tussle. Of course, Kim takes this opportunity to market a shady money lending business to everyone in the immediate vicinity before getting into it with the enemy. Back in the middle of the city, the world government troops are taken by surprise when they learn that not everyone in New Korea is a non-borrowed power user. On top of that, we learn that the reason these non-borrowed power people joined Mujin's war effort was because the president basically promised their families a pension should they fall in battle. So these soldiers turned suicide bombers valiantly fulfill their duty, as they grab as many enemies as they can before blowing themselves up. A few soldiers try to use this tactic against Kim at the border too. Not only that, but Denisvich gives his entire platoon the order to activate explosives strapped to their bodies to get rid of everyone in the immediate vicinity. The soldiers obey their orders, which results in the entire area getting bombed to shreds, taking out all the people unfortunate enough to get caught in the blast. When the dust settles, only Denisvich and Kim remain standing. And this time, Kim's ready to get to work. Meanwhile, back in the world government's territory, Mujin's leaked video has caused a scandal. News outlets attempt to interview Ipio about this, and we also find out that the world president's approval ratings have taken a huge blow because of this scandal. As you'd expect from an information war, citizens of the world government's opinions about the authenticity of Mujin's leaked video are divisive. On one hand, there are those who have fully bought into Mujin's propaganda and think that the footage is fake. On the other hand, there are people who believe it's actually the real deal. It's this whole he said, she said thing where your only options are either believing in pro-Mujin lackeys who were obviously hired to do damage control for the world government, or streamers whose journalistic bona fides are unidentified at best. Regardless of which side you're on though, one thing's for sure. The citizens of the world government want a direct statement from Mujin addressing this fiasco. In fact, trouble has started to brew at the capital, as people have started mounting protests demanding Mujin to do this. They don't get any answer though, because Mujin is currently busy with his ongoing invasion of New Korea. Right now, the man is inside the Project Wi-Fi facility overseeing things. To be specific, we find out that Mujin and his cronies have attached Wi-Fi devices on the gigantic Yoi pillar at the center of New Korea, which the world government calls Ground Zero. And with all the preparations set, Mujin uses his new arm to activate the Atom Quantum computer, which then triggers the Wi-Fi devices and causes the Yoi pillar to tremble. Back at the border, Denisvich and Kim get into a face-off. The world government trooper can't believe Kim just ate the explosion from earlier without so much a scratch. Denisvich knows Kim is just acting tough, because he's aware that there's no way he's unharmed. Denisvich opens their duel with a hard left overhand that lands right on Kim's face. He proceeds to deliver Kim a combo that culminates with a body shot. Denisvich gets overconfident and starts running his mouth, basically mocking Kim for being a non-borrowed power user. This just proves that this idiot doesn't know anything about Kim at all, because what Denisvich doesn't realize is his opponent just gave him a bunch of free shots, since Kim was still busy sucking on a cigar. Now, Kim came here for two things: to smoke cigars and kick butt, and he's all out of cigars. Denisvich tries to intimidate Kim by summoning his borrowed power, Perun, the Slavic god of thunder. Seeing Perun reminds Kim of Zeus, the bona fide god who kicked his butt back in Ragnarok. But the red-haired loan shark doesn't tuck tail and run. In fact, this gets him even more hyped to cave in Denisvich's head, as he pummels a soldier with first punch, two smash, before walloping him with a couple more techniques called second punch, baseball batter, and third punch, mouth smack. We then get a hilarious flashback where we learn that Kim actually had a bad case of post-traumatic stress disorder after Zeus defeated him during the Great War. As he puts it, he kept having the same nightmare for a week where Zeus kept defeating him in battle. So Kim came up with the idea to overcome his fear by trying to beat Zeus in his dreams. And oh man, Kim got so deep into it that he ended up sleeping for 1,456 days. And according to him, he and Zeus's record were tied at 5 wins apiece at this point. In the present, Kim busts out a technique called Zero Punch, Jiolabuk Du Iksan. Denisvich instantly recognizes that the sonic boom from this attack would be more than enough to kill him on the spot if it even so much as grazes him. All the soldier can do is freeze in place and accept that he's about to become a casualty of this stupid war. Denisvich notices that Kim just blew a hole right in his midsection. But surprisingly enough, we find out that this is just a scenario running in Denisvich's head. In truth, Kim gave him a pass by not hitting him directly, instead choosing to pull back and cancel his attack when he noticed the soldier flinching. And just to add insult to injury, Kim calls him a baby and tells Denisvich to come step up to him once he's finished breastfeeding. Denisvich satisfyingly gets humbled as he sits his butt down. Kim doesn't waste any more time on this scrub and instead gets back to work. This time, he and his men capitalize on the opportunity to drum up some business from the non-borrowed power refugees headed for New Korea. Because in Kim's own words, poverty means money. They hand out calling cards and promptly escort the non-borrowed power users towards New Korea. On a side note, we do learn that Paul and his mom survived the blast from earlier. Meanwhile, we learn that people from all over the world government's territories have started going on mass protests not just to learn the truth about the leaked footage, but to impeach Mujin. A flashback then reveals that Mujin visited the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. One of the facility's heads introduced that the United States government had been made aware of the existence of gods since they launched Project Apollo all the way back then. From there, they transformed Project Apollo into Project M, the same initiative that used to be presided over by Dr. Doogie. Long story short, Project M allowed them to capture a specimen belonging to this race of so-called gods. The head of the facility shows it to Mujin, who then realizes that his crusade against the gods isn't over yet. In the present, Mujin and Project Wi-Fi's researchers continue with their initiative to mess with the giant Yoi pillar. We soon find out that they're actually trying to lift the thing in order to raise the Coex underground mall from the bottom of the sea, because if you guys remember, Mujin considers this shopping center as sacred land. Their efforts fall flat, however, and the Wi-Fi devices they attach to the Yoi pillar just end up exploding. In turn, Mujin orders everyone to transition to Plan B, restoring the so-called Holy Land without removing the Yoi pillar. One of his employees protests that doing this will literally change the landscape, but Mujin doesn't care. So they proceed with this scheme. We then find out that Plan B involves siphoning off several name-borrowed powers via Wi-Fi, such as Shikto, Krishna, Ymir, and Kronos. These borrowed powers then work in conjunction with 112 Space G satellites from NASA and an overclocked atom quantum computer to help augment Mujin's power. Mujin then uses this power boost to brute force his way into raising their Holy Land from the bottom of the ocean. It works too. And even though several world government agents are endangered during this whole ordeal, Mujin gets what he wants and not just raises the Holy Land. He even manages to restore it back to the way it was from 17 years ago. Everyone around him gets super impressed and starts calling Mujin a god. Afterwards, Mujin leaves Project Wi-Fi's control room to link up with his executive assistant, P. Mujin almost collapses to the ground from fatigue, but he insists on addressing the protesters outside the building. Shortly after, Mujin walks out to the masses. He gets pelted by eggs and reporters start to ambush him. But the real kicker is when a random dude suddenly jumps in front of Mujin and assassinates him with what seems to be a knife to the gut. While this is happening, the World Government Council has just invited Yonif to declare their support for him. On the other hand, Yonif says it's all good and he's just going to leave if the only thing they can offer him is their support. But as these pruny industrialists say, they've got things under their sleeves that they can't wait to show him. Later, we discover that Mujin unsurprisingly survived the attempt on his life. In fact, the man didn't even go to the ICU. He just got first aid and went back to his office, saying he can't be away from his office with the current problems his regime is facing. Back at the council, Yonif is totally not on board with the council's plan to pretty much use their data farm to spread fake news. Oh, and we also find out that they've been spying on private citizens this whole time like some less bonkers version of a certain real-world country. Of course, the council won't have no for an answer, especially now that Yonif has found out about their super shady dealings. So they call on one of their goons and proceed to apparently murder the world president candidate right then and there. Somewhere else, Executive 1 and Ipio are walking along the world government building's corridors. As you'd expect, nothing comes out of one's mouth but adoration for Ipio. This time, he urges his boss to step up and do something about the ongoing problems the world government is facing. Meanwhile, we get the reveal that Yonif didn't actually die. It's the opposite. He killed each and every one of the geezers in the council, even their dumb goon. That's not all either, because we get an even bigger reveal when we find out Yonif's actually a double agent working directly for Mujin. As for Mujin, he's currently in his throne room, as he comes face to face with the same random dude who tried to assassinate him earlier. And instead of punishing the guy, the president of the world praises the dude for getting a good shot at him. Back at the corridor, Ipio pretty much tells one he's not going to do squat about the ongoing chaos. That's because he knows something the rest of these morons don't, that Mujin is one terrifying son of a gun. In fact, we immediately get a dose of Mujin's superb tactics, as he directly pulls from the fascist playbook and spins the ongoing narratives happening within the world government. To be specific, he's able to fix several of his problems by releasing a statement that says his leaked video was fabricated by the same World Government Council members that Yonif assassinated for him. Oh, and we find out that Mujin has just summarily executed his assassin. Like we said, that's some textbook fascist maneuvers right there. Meanwhile, back in New Korea, we find out that Xiao Chen, Ahan, and Daewi's Nox operatives have successfully quelled the invasion by world government forces. Xiao Chen and Ahan discovered that the enemy troops' Wi-Fi receivers were rigged with bombs and that each and every one of them is a non-borrowed power user. Ahan gets all judgy and starts criticizing the soldiers for acting against their fellow non-borrowed power users, to which a random soldier tells her to shut her dumb mouth because she doesn't know anything. And you can't blame these guys either. After all, it's not like there's a lot of decent employment opportunities in world government territories for non-borrowed power users. As the soldier puts it, poor people like them don't have time to think about crap like ethics or responsibility. Ahan is put in her place and does shut her mouth. But being judgmental comes second nature to this orphan, and her next target is none other than Xiao Chen. She pretty much comes to the conclusion that Xiao Chen is a monster when the Nox Bishop expresses her disappointment at seeing all the property damage in New Korea instead of worrying about civilian casualties. At the same time, monstrous angels have started hovering above the skies of New Korea, but Xiao Chen reassures Ahan that everything's going to be alright. All they need to do is have faith and trust Daewi and her lame brother. Somewhere else, Mori and Dewi are walking along what looks like a market. We soon find out that Mujin's recent underhanded tactics have allowed his approval ratings to not just bounce back, but reach a new all-time high. Somewhere else, World Government Executive C, who's one of the few people who knows the truth behind Mujin's rise to power, pretty much calls everyone who thinks the world president a hero as an idiot. Regardless, he still dutifully gets to work when their headquarters receives a code red after they become aware of Mori's presence in the area. Meanwhile, Daewi gets suspicious when he notices the entire marketplace is empty. A kid suddenly shows up in front of them with explosives apparently strapped to her body. Daewi spots this, which allows Executive C to jump right in front of our hero for a sneak attack. It's a good plan too, because Daewi is such a softie that he chooses to freeze the bomb that the kid's holding to prevent it from detonating. Mori then gets rid of the bomb with a precision strike from Yoi, but this whole sequence turns out to be a part of C's plan to find an opening in Daewi's defenses, which ultimately allows him to slash our hero's right eye, the same eye containing his sage powers. C's genius plan works, and Daewi is blinded in one eye again. He tells Mori he's all good, but it's going to take some time before he can use his sage abilities again. Our heroes finally figure out that the kid is part of their enemy's scheme. Mori tries to go after the kid, but Daewi manages to stop him, telling his best friend that she probably thinks they're the bad guys for turning her life upside down with their recent crusade against Mujin and the world government. Mori gets even more livid when he realizes that the world government are now employing non-conventional military tactics to deal with them, namely using kids as suicide bombers. Daewi agrees with this, so much so that he instructs Mori to forget his training for a while and just go ahead and do his worst. Mori transforms into his Jin Mori form and promptly starts wrecking shop until he accosts Executive C. Not too far away, Daewi senses strange energy coming from a building off in the distance. Meanwhile, we found out that Mori didn't just capture C, our hero straight up broke his legs to prevent him from using his powers, but C is able to apply some first aid by injecting himself with painkillers. Mori also notices the strange energy coming from the same building Daewi spotted, as C explains that the building is actually a Wi-Fi station. Not just any ordinary Wi-Fi station though. This one houses a specific world government agent who possesses a borrowed power called Al-Wahhab. Now, Al-Wahhab gives its user an ability known as Jihad, which according to Youngji Park also means suicide bombing. Youngji Park's ignorance about the differences between these two concepts and slight undertones of religious bigotry aside, C's point is that he can turn each and every one of the world government's operatives into a suicide bomber using Wi-Fi. Yes, even the soldiers stationed in New Korea. All he needs to do is give his men the order. But here's the thing. C tells Mori that he hasn't given the order yet. On the other hand, Mori correctly deduces that C specifically targeted Daewi's right eye, knowing that he's the only person who has the ability to bring down the entire Wi-Fi station without so much as lifting a finger. C's painkillers then kicks in and, like a criminal mastermind, he basically invites Mori to play along a sick game if he wants to save Ahan and other innocent civilians from getting blown up. An entire crowd of people holding bombs in their hands then suddenly appear nearby. C gives Mori the rundown of this little game, where our hero's job is to get past the horde of people holding explosives and destroy the Wi-Fi station. While Mori does this, C's role would be to do his best to try and stop him. C goes on to explain that the only way to stop the bombs these random people are holding would be to allow them to touch Mori for 3 seconds. Right now, he has 10 minutes before these bombs go off. In turn, the crowd of people starts swarming Mori, who allows them to give him the bad touch. But you see, this is what C has been expecting to happen all along, as he tries to slice our hero's throat while the crowd rushes toward him. Too bad though, because there's no armor in the world stronger than plot armor. And for Mori, this comes in the form of his dragon armor suits, which protect him from C's attack and send the sneaky villain flying. Mori follows up with a Yoi strike, which frustrates C so much that he decides to cheat and just detonate everyone's bombs. And to prevent Mori from stopping him, C creates clones of himself using his project image ability. But his efforts fall flat when he and his clones are suddenly barraged by Yoi strikes. And you know C is about to die when he has a flashback revealing how much he hates himself for betraying his allies in the Great War and working for Mujin's world government. In the present, C reveals that he also has a voice-activated bomb detonator, which makes you wonder why he didn't just use that in the first place. Regardless, he activates the bombs each member of the crowd is holding while he goes for one more clash with Mori. Mori easily takes C down with a high kick to the jaw, while the bombs mysteriously float in the air. We then find out that Dewi has just summoned her best boy Heite to use his bubble ability to gather the bombs and contain the blast. Meanwhile, Mori gives C a much-deserved beating, as he gives him several precision strikes to the chin, temples, and a few other vital points. C gasses out and concedes defeat, while Mori tells him to just give up. In response, C apologizes to Mori for what happened to Jin Taijin, and just like we told you, C ultimately dies when he blows himself up as penance for betraying his allies in the Great War. Say what you will about C, but he's so far the only world government operative who has legitimately managed to lay a scratch on either Mori or Dewi up to this point. On the other hand, Dewi checks on his best friend to ask if he's okay after seeing C basically commit seppuku in front of them. And well, we get one of the most cold-blooded lines in the arc so far, as Mori tells Dewi that now, there's just one less bad guy out there to worry about. Still, the other world government agents at the nearby Wi-Fi station get word that C's dead and immediately proceed to activate Al-Wahhab to turn the world government's advanced forces into human weapons. The countdown begins, but this whole sequence concludes as soon as it starts when Mori simply uses Yoi to bust out a technique called Mori Jin Original Version Yoi, Railgun. Yoi flies through the middle of the temple and severs the connection between Wi-Fi and the agent who possesses Al-Wahhab. The story moves its focus to an entirely different section of the tale, as we see Dusik Kim partying with his crew after a hard day's work putting world government soldiers in body bags and herding the non-borrowed power refugees to New Korea. His right-hand man is concerned that Kim's getting absolutely hammered right now, but the boss says he's alright. Although he does get all gabby and starts going on a monologue about how most of the members in his crew are made up of people he had beaten in combat before. Kim's whole speech boils down to the fact that he's actually sort of jealous of Poon Wang. As a matter of fact, Kim can't hide how insecure he is that Poon Wang actually got himself a degree and became a human rights lawyer, while he just ended up getting filthy rich during the intervening years. As Kim puts it, this was the first time he ever felt like he lost to someone weaker than him. Kim goes on to whine about how he's also insecure about losing to Q, which he attributes to his own arrogance. According to him, he failed to notice Q getting stronger each time they fought, which ultimately led to Q honing his skills to the point that Kim got booted out of the six. The loan shark eventually puts a stop to his pity party and instead tells his right-hand man about his ultimate dream, one that he got after marveling at the giant Yoi pillar on the horizon. Specifically, Kim plans on building a so-called Tower of Despair in New Korea. And if you were wondering what the hell a Tower of Despair is, it's this 5-story tower of loan sharks. He announces this to all of his underlings, who cry happy tears after listening to their boss's bonkers idea. His party is interrupted shortly after when Paul, the non-borrowed power boy from earlier, demands an audience with Kim. Kim recognizes the boy and tells his goons to let go of him. After all, Paul has made it clear that he's come to this place to do business with Kim. From there, Kim tells Paul his loan packages, which specifically boils down to having collateral. And think of Kim what you will, but the man offers a lot of options. He doesn't just take property as collateral, he even gives you the option to offer your body parts too. Paul listens to all this and pretty much tells Kim he's willing to put all of his organs up as collateral, plus his heart. In exchange, Kim has to take the boy under his wing and train him, which we're not exactly sure how loans work. In any case, Paul's ballsiness reminds Kim of Poon Wang, so he accepts the deal. They seal it with a cute pinky thumb handshake. There's spit on it, so it's legally binding. And with that, Kim tells his boys that he's closed another deal and everyone parties again, somewhere else inside the world government's headquarters. Mujin meets a bunch of as yet unnamed random kids who are part of a new squad he calls Team Generation X. The same girl who taught Mori how to fight with a staff is there too. Plus we get the reveal that the person leading this team of genetically enhanced kids is none other than Dean. And with that, Mujin gives Team Generation X its first mission, to get rid of Dusik Kim. Soon enough, Dean and Team Generation X are deployed to New Korea to fulfill their orders. Unsurprisingly, even the soldiers driving their convoy are creeped out by these mutants. In the back of the truck, Dean debriefs the team about their target, Kim. Dean stops one of the other Team Generation X members, Mon-Sin Lee, interrupts him to basically run his mouth like an idiot and try to start some smoke. Lee blabs about how he doesn't like Dean acting like a leader. You know, typical meathead garbage. Fair play to Dean though, because he maintains his composure and instead asks Lee what he proposes to fix this issue. And being the aggressive moron that he is, Lee challenges Dean to a fight. Meanwhile, on the sidelines, we get introduced to another member of the group named Subang Huh, who asks the heir of Hall Yang-soo if she's a boy or a girl. Oh, and Yeonjae Park finally bothers to give her a name, Bongram So. Then there's these creepy twins with Astro Boy hairdos named Adom and Adum, who are just giggling in the corner while Lee messes with the entire team's dynamic. The entire group finally shuts up when another one of their members, a guy wearing military uniform, calls for everyone's attention and recites the world government's Pledge of Allegiance word for word. To no one's surprise, Lee starts causing more trouble when he punches Military Boy in the face and starts mocking him. The boy then starts uttering weird crap that Lee interprets as nonsense before kicking the dude so hard that it almost flips over the entire convoy. This blindfolded idiot isn't done either. He tries to follow up with another punch, but at this point, Dean has had enough of Lee's topless antics and tells him he's going to be very sorry if he ever lays a hand on one of their teammates again. Lee tries to run his mouth, but the tension dissipates completely when the boy recovers and gets between the two to remind him that they're all comrades here. Props to this guy as well, because he just ate up Lee's attacks like they were nothing, something that Lee can't believe. Yeonjae Park finally remembers to give the boy a name, Gutgun Lee. He's a Korean war fanboy, which explains why he's wearing army clothing. And on top of that, he seems like a chill dude, given that he actually praises Lee's strength. Gutgun even tells him he's a top-notch soldier. We then get introduced to the last member of this ragtag team of child soldiers, Go Ding Han, a weird kid with a bowl cut who, like real-world children, spends most of his time staring at his phone. Team Generation X soon arrives in New Korea to proceed with their job. Lee approaches one of Kim's henchmen and demands his boss's whereabouts. Meanwhile, we find out that Kim has become like that one uncle who teaches underage kids how to drink alcohol, as he mentors Paul on how to properly chug a drink. Don't worry though, the kid's just downing a glass of soda. However, Kim and Paul are interrupted when the same henchman from earlier arrives. Kim asks him what's wrong, and all the poor dude can tell him is to run before Lee takes him out. From there, Kim sees that Team Generation X has laid out several of his men. Lee acts all tough and tells Kim they're here to kill him, while Adum and Adom just annoy the crap out of our beloved loan shark. The twins go on this whole shtick that's meant to just make them look cute, but just comes off as insufferable. In fact, Kim's right-hand man almost does us a favor when he tries to attack one of these kids just to stop hearing their voices. But Kim stops him and instead asks Team Generation X what exactly they want. Adom replies by sneaking up behind Kim's sidekick for a quick backstab. That's a stupid move, because the twins and the rest of Team Generation X instantly learn that Kim has no problem beating up kids if they even try to lay a finger on one of his men. So Kim gives Adom a solid overhand right that lands square on his head, and our favorite loan shark punches his kid so hard that Adom's upper body explodes in a satisfying puff of white smoke. Kim soon realizes that he has taken damage after his attack, which rips his outer jacket off. Meanwhile, Kim's right-hand man does his duty and whisks Paul as far away from the battlefield as possible. We then learn that Adom has the ability to regenerate himself when he reconstructs his entire upper body after Kim turned him into dust a few moments ago. Not far away, Lee acts like the absolute scum that he is, as he blocks Paul and Kim's right-hand man's path in an attempt to murder them. Thankfully, Dean is there to rein in this idiot, telling Lee to let them go, since their mission is to deal with Kim and no one else. Lee makes the right choice and obeys Dean's command. At the same time, Han checks his phone and asks what Team Generation X's chances are of winning in a fight against Kim. The phone shows him a probability rate of 98%. It's just too bad that Han's brain has turned into mush from being glued to his phone the entire time that he fails to understand whether that 98% win rate is for Kim or Team Generation X. Because remember, this bowl-cut donning nerd just specifically asked about Team Generation X's chances of winning the fight against Kim. On the other hand, Lee tries to showboat and busts out his Wing Chun moves, which makes him fail to notice that Kim's already right in his face. To this meathead's credit, he does get to land a few shots on Kim, but none of them even leave a scratch on the battle-hardened loan shark. On top of that, Lee starts wussing out when he senses that a single hit from Kim's punch would literally take his head off at the least. In fact, we almost get treated to this satisfying display if not for Bongram intervening and swatting away Kim's fist with her staff just as he was about to land a right straight to Lee's stupid face. Kim is then forced to take on Bongram, and Team Generation X seemingly gets the upper hand when Dean jumps in and hits Kim with a Rei Taekwondo Home Gyoli kick. However, Dean instantly senses that there's something weird about their target. And even though he's able to use his precognitive powers to land a 12-6 elbow on Kim, Dean soon realizes that the man is not like the other martial artists he's faced in the past. That's because Kim doesn't subscribe to all that warrior code mumbo-jumbo. To him, every fight is a bar fight. Dean knows this, and he's well aware how dangerous street fighters can get. Because these types of dudes don't go for flashy techniques and borrowed powers, they just do anything it takes to win. In fact, it's at that moment that Dean finds himself in a pinch, as Kim grabs him by the collar and gets ready to smash his face into the ground. Dean is only saved when the other annoying twin, Adum, flies toward Kim and explodes. At the same time, we learn that Han's phone is actually a doodad called an all-knowing phone, which he then uses to summon a quartet of creatures called the Four Wrathful Guardians. The 4 wrathful guardians and the annoying twins try to gang up on Kim. On the other hand, Dean, who knows better, tells his team to wait a minute. The story then switches its focus to Paul and Kim's trusty sidekick. Paul asks him why they're running away. Kim's right-hand man replies with another piece of information that not a single one of Team Generation X's most forgettable members knows. That if Kim lets you hit him first, then you can bet your butt that he's going to mess you up 100%. That's the truth too, as we get back to the middle of the battlefield and see Kim dismantling Han's 4 wrathful guardians with his bare hands. Gut Gun uses his opportunity to lunge at Kim. And to be fair, this Korean War fanboy fares better than the rest of the team, as he manages to land a few good hits on Kim with his Korean military martial arts combo. But Gut Gun immediately learns that fighting with honor is nowhere near enough to bring down someone who's fighting to win when Kim pulls out a classic street fight move, to spit blood on your opponent's face. Gut Gun ends up temporarily blinded from this sweet maneuver, which then leaves Kim with an opportunity to go for a takedown attempt. Kim slams Gut Gun so hard that he starts coughing up blood. From there, Kim goes to town on this teenage soldier wannabe with some good old-fashioned ground and pound. In fact, Kim caves in Gut Gun's face so hard that Dean and Lee can only watch in awe while it happens. On the other hand, the all-knowing phone finally spoon-feeds Han that the 98% win rate it showed him earlier is actually in Team Generation X's favor. You know, exactly how he asked it before. Somewhere else, Mori and Dewi have just laid waste to another world government facility. A random agent then tells them they're wasting their time here because they should hurry back to New Korea if they want to save Kim from his assassins. Back on the battlefield, Kim just continues pummeling Gut Gun and only stops when Bongram comes to her teammate's aid. She uses her staff to lock Kim's arm in place and steps on the man's back to subdue him. Lee and Dean follow up with a couple of nice shots, which do manage to hurt Kim a bit. But all this ultimately does is make the man angrier, as he tries to cave in Gut Gun's skull with a headbutt before fending off Bongram and Dean. The 2 kids are sent flying, but Kim has to deal with another assault, this time from a joint attack from Lee and the twins. In turn, all these amateurs get is a swift body slam and Kim catches them before they can even land their strikes. Bongram then puts pressure on their target. She nearly hits Kim with her staff right in the face, but our favorite swole loan shark is able to dodge it. Meanwhile, Dean realizes that they're way out of their league with this assignment, especially considering that Kim just busted through his suit, which apparently was given extra defensive upgrades prior to their deployment. Dean contrasts Kim's strength to Mori's. In his own words, Mori's strength is like that of a legendary blade sharpened by a master craftsman. On the other hand, Kim's strength is like the raw power of a wild bear. While this is happening, Han finally makes himself useful when he starts dancing around while carrying a huge club. This allows him to give his teammates a few attack and defense buffs, while nerfing Kim's speed. Oh, and this ability sends Kim to another dimension for some reason, one that looks like a gigantic treasure room. Of course, Kim forgets about slapping around these mutants when he sees there's gold all over the place. Not only that, but this actually ends up making Kim stronger, proving HUD just made the rest of Team Generation X's job harder for everyone. Meanwhile, Han continues to support his team and checks his all-knowing phone to see what's going on in the middle of the battlefield. Someone from Team Generation X yells at HUD to turn off his dumb illusion spell in order to remove Kim's buffs. But they're too late, because Kim gets to HUD before he can do anything. The man punches the kid so hard that his head literally flies off. And since HUD won't be using his club anyway, Kim adds insult to injury and steals the thing from the boy's dead hands. Afterwards, Dean was able to peek into the future for 5 seconds. And we soon find out that Team Generation X's members are somehow co-evolving as the battle goes on. Meanwhile, World Government Headquarters receives word that Team Generation X has started sinking. Back on the battlefield, Kim unsurprisingly gets extra aggressive when Dean tries to sneak up on him and his supposed treasure. Dean is able to block Kim's powerful punch with his left forearm, but it's too powerful that it breaks his illusions. And if that's not good enough for you, Dean literally loses his left arm after taking the full force of Kim's devastating blow. But if you didn't know it by now, Dean is a trooper. He just shrugs off his recent dismemberment and tells the rest of Team Generation X to get their act together because there's no way in hell they could beat Kim without good old-fashioned teamwork. At the same time, Gut Gun recovers and thanks Han for rescuing him earlier, although when exactly that happened remains up for debate. Regardless, all of Team Generation X surround Kim, who in turn notices how it appears like these murderous miners have fused with one another. He's not wrong either, because we find out that these kids are now able to share their abilities. In fact, Lee shows us more of his incompetence when the guy barely holds it together after he starts seeing one of Dean's premonitions. Everyone in the team realizes they're co-evolving, while World Government Headquarters and Mujin remark that their current instability stems from the fact that this is their first time syncing with one another. All the while, Gut Gun analyzes Kim's physical statistics and is impressed by what he sees. Kim thanks him by hitting him with a right hook to the face, but Gut Gun doesn't fall. Instead, he summons his national treasure, which is called full combat gear. It's self-explanatory too, as the boy suddenly appears with a survival pack, grenades, and a rifle in his hands. From there, Gutgun uses a technique called Basic Firing Position PRI, Preliminary Rifle Instruction, which actually doesn't do anything except allow him to maneuver around quite freely and easily. He takes off his heavy survival pack to make movement more easier and starts using his rifle to shoot at Kim. Here's the thing though, we immediately find out that his national treasure is more useless than we thought because it turns out that the rifle doesn't even come with a single bullet. So Gutgun just gets goofy and goes ta-ta-ta-ta-ta to imitate the sound of gunfire. Kim has had enough of this trifling crap, so he gives Gutgun an overhand left to the side of the head. In fact, even Dean and Lee are puzzled by what the heck their teammate was just doing right now. Still, Dean makes the most out of this situation and takes point. He orders Team Generation X to mobilize and, to be fair, he sees the value in what Gutgun's doing, serving as the squad's tank by eating up Kim's strikes and diverting all the attention towards himself. In turn, Dean tells Bongram to be their long-range DPS, Lee is their short-range DPS, while Hup provides buffs and nerfs. Dean then turns to the twins, who for some reason are cuddling right now, and tells them to get their heads in the game. The twins obey the command, which results in Adom literally cannibalizing Adum. This allows them to transform into a mech unit called Mechanical God Deus Ex Machina. The robot charges up an ultra long-range particle beam, while Lee utters unhelpful crap like usual. At this point, even Bongram has had enough of this topless idiot's antics and tells Lee to just be happy that they've got a squad leader like Dean who's willing to give up his own arm for the sake of his teammates. But you can always trust a meathead to ignore good advice. On the other hand, Dean asks Han what he can do, and this phone-addicted nerd more than makes up for his prior uselessness with what he does next. For one, he reveals that he's not just some lethargic fugly boy, as he transforms into a girl with long red hair. Even better, Han's hair has the ability to heal its targets, and she immediately uses it to restore Dean's missing left arm. Han's redemption doesn't end there either, as she uses her all-knowing phone's upgrade ability to tag the rest of Team Generation X and uses it to keep track of their vital statistics in case they need a quick healing spell. On the other hand, Hu's back at it dancing with his giant club, as he activates an ability that debuffs Kim's movement speed. Dean tells Lee that they should now double-team Kim, but the idiot refuses to cooperate as usual and instead charges Kim by himself. Lee showboats and channels a technique he calls hit-and-run outboxing, Muhammad Ali style, which makes him float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. To be fair, he does manage to land a few well-placed jabs on Kim, as you'd expect from a fighting style cribbed from one of the greatest champions in the history of the sport. But here's the thing, even an effective style like boxing has its weaknesses, especially when you're faced with a street fighter in a no-holds-barred match. So Kim eats up a few weak jabs before smacking Lee in the back of the head with an open palm strike that hands down rocks him. And just for good measure, our favorite loan shark puts the fear of death in this moron with a precision Stockton slap that nearly puts him to sleep. Kim is just about to finish the job with a powerful uppercut, but Gutgun proves he's a solid teammate when he jumps in between the two combatants and takes the hit for Lee. And while let's just say Lee realizes how much of a scrub he is when he notices how that one hit from Kim could have nearly ended his life, while Gutgun just eats up everything that their target is hitting him with. Han even drives the point home when she shows Lee Kim and Gutgun's health point bar. The long and short of it is that Kim has around 5 bars of health, which is currently depleted in half, while Gutgun has 48, with only about 8 of them completely spent. Meanwhile, Gutgun finds himself adjusting to the precognitive abilities he received by fusing with Dean, concluding that it at least allows him to minimize the damage he takes from Kim's attacks. Nearby, Han provides backup by healing Gutgun while he continues tanking Kim's strikes. Not too far away, Deus Ex Machina is just about ready to shoot its particle beam at their target, while Dean, Lee, and Gutgun triple-team Kim. Bongram gets in on the action too, with a quick Pumbaa serpent technique. A split second later, Ha shields them with stone statues from Deus Ex Machina's oncoming particle beam. The gambit hits Kim, and the beam causes an explosion in the middle of the battlefield. Some distance away, even Kim's right-hand man and Paul are sent flying from the blast. The dust settles and Deus Ex Machina runs out of juice, which separates Adom and Adum once more. Meanwhile, Team Generation X, Paul and Kim's sidekick spot him lying on the ground. Kim's right-hand man tells Paul to stay still, because while everybody else thinks they've got the better of his boss, he knows that things are just about to heat up. In fact, he explicitly tells Paul that Kim's #1 asset isn't his unbelievable power or insane dynamic vision, it's his gas tank. That is to say, Kim has near unlimited endurance. At that moment, the infamous loan shark gets back on his feet and gets ready for another round with his supposed assassins. Shortly after, we get the reveal that Han actually contained the blast from Deus Ex Machina's particle beam in order to prevent it from destroying all of New Korea. This just goes to show that Kim didn't just survive a simple energy attack, he basically just shrugged off something akin to a nuclear blast. Meanwhile, Han checks Kim's health points and sees that they only need a couple more hits to kill their target. So Team Generation X mobilizes once again to finish the job, ganging up on Kim before he can make another move. But their all-out assault falls flat, as Kim busts Adom's jaw with another overhand right. In fact, everybody gets a piece of his hands. In turn, Dean orders the squad to maintain formation while Han tells everyone that it's not going to take much longer before they completely terminate Kim's threat. On the other hand, Han suddenly gets a notification from the all-knowing phone, which is now offering them 5 options to change tactics in dealing with their target. Meanwhile, Gut Gun takes a stray fist when Dean dodges one of Kim's punches. Dean then notices that Kim is just an absolute beast. See, as he puts it, the key to winning against a group of people when you're by yourself is to lure them over to a spot where you can fight them one-on-one. In not as many words, this is a real-world combat tactic known as bottleneck. But Kim is doing the exact opposite of that. He's just charging right into the middle of everyone, throwing hands at anyone stupid enough to get in range of his powerful strikes. According to Dean, Kim's breaking every rule in the book with this unorthodox approach to combat tactics, which boils down to Kim just beating the crap out of everyone he sees. Team Generation X's leader thinks this approach makes no sense at all, yet it somehow works for the former 6 member that they're fighting right now. Things get so bad for these murderous mutant kids in the middle of their current clash that the all-knowing phone now presents Han with 23 tactical options to deal with Kim. Meanwhile, their target successfully catches Adom and Adum with his bare hands and pops the twins like a pimple with a powerful bear hug. However, God of High School's story takes a concerning turn when Kim suddenly has a flashback, which may indicate that our favorite loan shark is about to bite the dust. Regardless, Kim remembers that time Q defeated him in their duel. Back then, Q commented on how Kim wasn't able to evolve at all in the last 17 years, leading to his defeat and expulsion from the Six's ranks. His reminiscence then moves on to Jin Taijin and Hao Yang-so, who pretty much underestimated his skills back when he was still a member of the Six. Another memory pops into his mind yet again, this time during Kim's fateful battle with Paladin, aka Changju Moon, who also happened to be Executive S's mentor. And just to make it clear, this is actually the battle that ultimately saw Kim defeating Changju, which then allowed him to be inducted into the Six's ranks. At the time, Changju tried mentoring Kim during their duel, telling him that he could reach even greater heights if he stopped being so lazy. Changju went on to say that Kim only needed 5 years of hard work if he wanted to become unstoppable. In the present, Han thinks they've finally taken down Kim, but every member of Team Generation X gets a tingle down their spine when the man gets back on his feet once more. Han then asks her all-knowing phone why Kim isn't dead yet, and we find out that Kim has a special ability that only activates whenever his hit points drop below 10%. This results in Kim's attack power and defense levels reaching their maximum level for a period of time, a transformation that people refer to as Monster Dusik. Meanwhile, Kim pulls out a cigarette from his pocket. He lights it, takes a puff, and busts out one of the most hardcore lines in the story arc so far. In Kim's own words, "It's a beautiful day to die, ain't it?" Nearby, the all-knowing phone recalculates Kim's likelihood of victory during the scuffle. And now we find out that the tables have turned, as Kim now has a 98% win probability against these murderous kids. Kim wastes no time and punches Lee so hard that the topless idiot flies and spins around in the air. Kim follows up with an elbow to the kid's face, while he further remembers his epic duel with Changju. In a flashback, we finally learn how he replied to the man after Changju tried to tell him how to fight. And in true Kim fashion, he told his opponent that borrowed power, martial arts, and all that stuff's for old farts like Changju, because geniuses like him don't need that crap. They then had their final clash, and it ended with Changju's defeat. The rest, as they say, is history. Shortly after, Team Generation X regroups and realizes they're in for it now. Even Lee starts to rant about how Han's healing powers are useless in the face of the monster they're fighting at this very moment. There's no time to come up with a different plan though, as Kim gets back to work. This time he gouges a chunk of flesh from Gut Gun's arm before manhandling the poor boy. Bomb Grandma has it worse, because she doesn't even get the chance to mount any offense before Kim strikes her in the gut. Hud tries to get cheeky and goes for a sneak attack. Dean watches this happen and knows that Hud's about to get his butt beaten. He desperately calls for his teammate to fall back so that they don't lose his ongoing buff and nerf effects. But it's too late. Kim pulverizes the kid's magic club, which effectively nullifies the entire team's power boost and Kim's movement speed debuff. Meanwhile, Han notices that Kim's win rate has risen up to nearly 100% now. As for Dean, our boy gets another vision and instantly recognizes that this isn't his borrowed power working. His life is just flashing before his very eyes because Dean knows Kim is about to murder him. All of Team Generation X feel the same way too, so much so that these young kids finally realize that Kim is the perfect example of the apex of old humanity, the same kind of people who fought in the Great War without the need for fancy little borrowed powers. On top of that, they start to wonder just how powerful the Monkey King's army was back then, considering that not even the likes of Kim could defeat them. Team Generation X can only accept their impending doom right now, as Kim takes his time and walks back towards his prey. Dean, being the great squad leader that he is, stands between Kim and the rest of his team. He then starts talking smack, telling their opponent that Kim might be a beast, but he's still not as strong as someone like Mori. Dean attempts to offer Kim a one-on-one duel, telling the man he might be able to beat him. But we all know by now that Kim is a legit fighter. Instead of entertaining his enemy's requests or hearing them out, he simply replies by telling Dean to shut the hell up and just die. Kim cocks back his right fist to give Dean the killing blow. The boy can only watch, knowing what's about to happen to him. On the other hand, Kim makes sure there's no way Dean will be able to dodge his final attack by going with another classic street fight tactic, throwing sand in your opponent's eyes. Dean's temporarily blinded, and although the boy knows that Kim is about to decapitate him with a zero-punch Jollibuk do Iksan punch, Dean is also well aware that there's nothing he can do to prevent it. In fact, Dean even creates this whole perfect analogy for his current predicament. Simply put, knowing a meteor is coming doesn't mean you can escape death. And well, Dean just accepts his fate, as Kim's fist comes hurtling towards his pretty face. But then, Bongram suddenly launches her staff towards Kim's side. This gives Ha a split second to teleport in and eat up Kim's punch to protect Dean. Dean, on the other hand, can only watch and listen to Ha's final words before he flatlines, telling him that they're now even for what Kim did to his left arm earlier. Of course, Lee doesn't want to get upstaged, so he tries to take over the scene by shoving Ha away from the brunt of Kim's zero-punch technique. Ha survives, and Kim finally gets rid of this topless moron for good with a satisfying crunch. At the same time, Dean contracts post-traumatic stress disorder and can only freeze in place while he laments about not even having the time to mourn their fallen comrades. We then get a satisfying scene where we see that Kim's zero-punch just popped Lee's head clean off. And it's at this moment that Team Generation X realizes that all it's going to take is one hit from Kim for them to join Lee in the afterlife. Our story then goes to a flashback from a minute ago where we see A-Dome and A-Dome fusing once again to become a mecha unit. This time, however, they transform into a staff and give themselves to Bongram, telling her to kick Kim's butt for them. In the present, we find out that Lee has turned into a ghost. Dean uses an ability called Generation X Power Transfer to absorb Lee's soul and add it to his own power. Back in the world government's headquarters, Mujin gets excited when a random employee tells him that Generation X has successfully reached singularity. On the battlefield, Dean prepares to use Renewal Secret Arts Jin Hochuk, while Bongram arms herself with a staff literally made from the twins' body. In turn, Kim senses that Dean and Bongram's energy signature has now become similar to his old 6 teammates, namely Jin Taijin and Ho Yang So. This makes him think that the two kids have grown up before his very eyes. This gets Kim more excited, as he declares that he's leveled up his game too. Then the final clash happens, as Bongram tries to hit the man with her panhandler technique, while Dean goes for his Jin Hochuk. In true God of High School fashion, the bout devolves into a gigantic explosion that covers the entire battlefield. The dust settles, and we see that Han is the only Team Generation X member left standing. She wonders who won the clash and is shocked when she spots Dean and Bongram laid out on the ground, while Kim is still standing. Han gets so scared that she turns into a boy again. Meanwhile, Kim asks if Han's ready for round 2, because he's not done putting these murderous mutant kids in body bags just yet. Kim's just about ready to pop Han's head when Dean recovers. You've got to hand the boy some credit too, because he's the ideal skipper of Team Generation X, the kind who's willing to die for the squad. Dean tells Gutgun to evacuate all their other teammates while he buys them some time. Han protests, but Dean reassures him that Kim took a heavy amount of damage in their most recent clash, and it's only a matter of time before the man gasses out. Han, on the other hand, knows that Dean is just trying to make him feel better. He's calculated the odds and there's no way either team captain can defeat Kim. Han realizes that Dean is actually ready to die today, and for some reason, he turns into a girl again to try and come up with a plan to allow every remaining Team Generation X member to survive. Meanwhile, at the heart of New Korea, Ahan catches wind that world government agents have started going with terror tactics in their attempt to invade the territory, as numerous unnamed operatives start doing home invasions and murdering its unwitting citizens. Ahan is suddenly taken by surprise when an energy wave crashes through New Korea's streets. Unknown to her, the world government has just enacted something they call Phase 2 tactic, which involves sending a platoon of agents led by none other than the original Q. These agents then head over to Kim's location. Back in Mujin's throne room, P asks if the platoon is enough to take down Kim, to which the world president says it doesn't really matter. All they need is to get what they want. Meanwhile, world government agents accost Kim's right-hand man and Paul, using them as leverage against him. Simply put, if Kim attempts to resist arrest, they're going to kill these two. Paul is shocked when Kim apologizes and just continues to beat on the agents trying to arrest him. On the other hand, his right-hand man knows what's up, so he tells Kim that it's been an honor working with him, as their captors prepare to strike them both down. Meanwhile, Kim continues murdering any agent stupid enough to try and stop him. He's aware that he's not fast enough to save his pals, but he sure can avenge their deaths. But then we get a bit of a twist when Dean prevents the world government agents from executing Paul and Kim's sidekick before telling them to stand down. All of a sudden, Gudgun smacks Dean in the head and knocks him out. This allows the rest of Team Generation X to mobilize and evacuate everyone from their squad. They manage to escape Kim's wrath, while the random agents get killed en masse when Kim gets back to business. Meanwhile, all Team Generation X can do is gain as much distance from Kim as possible, realizing that they're nothing but amateurs compared to an actual fighter like Kim. Later, Team Generation X meets with Mujin, who tells him to remember his defeat forever and use it as motivation to get stronger. Dean is able to deduce that Mujin knew he and his squad couldn't defeat Kim in the first place and wonders if the world president's power is on the same level as Kim's. All this makes Dean wonder what the point of Generation X is. Shortly after, P asks Mujin if he's disappointed with the results of Team Generation X's mission. He isn't, because Mujin knows that these kids took away something more valuable from the assignment, the experience that came with facing someone of Kim's caliber. Mujin then explains that tens of thousands of people from Generation X will be born soon, and even though a small squad of these mutants wouldn't be enough to stop the Six, an entire army of them sure could. Not only that, but Mujin truly believes that a Generation X army would even be capable of defeating the gods in case a second Ragnarok happens. Of course, all this is in line with Mujin's goal of proving that humanity is better than gods and monsters. And after a short monologue, we find out that Q has just entered the world president's throne room. Meanwhile, Kim has just taken out hundreds of world government agents. Still, all this makes him wonder what Mujin is trying to become. Soon enough, God of High School's story takes a sudden 180-degree turn when we discover that Mujin's spy, Jonas Yonef, had recently been murdered. News outlets reveal that Yonef wasn't the only one to get assassinated, as it turns out that someone has been taking out potential world president candidates left and right. What's more is that citizens of the world government have flip-flopped on their stance once again, this time reverting to their original opinion that Mujin's leaked video showing him killing Jin Taijin is authentic. All of this has caused another round of mass protests against Mujin. In the meantime, Ipio, like the rest of God of High School's heroes from the Great War, knows that the footage is authentic. What the Nine-Tailed Fox is trying to figure out, however, is who took this video 17 years ago. Ipio tables the investigation for now and focuses on the batch of Generation X kids he recently expatriated from Balhae-controlled North Korea and subsequently brought to the world government for testing. We learn that the X syndrome, the disease that plagues those with the X gene, actually has a 70% mortality rate. In turn, Ipio starts feeling guilty about the part he played in allowing the rise of Generation X. Simply put, he sort of blames himself for being one of the keys and surmises that Sujan is taking care of her own Generation X kids up there in the north as a way to alleviate the guilt they feel for being indirectly responsible for the deaths of these children. In the end, Ipio admits that he's going to need Mujin's help to save these mutant kids, considering that he and the world government have the data that might lead to a cure for X syndrome. In another part of the world government building, Team Generation X has begun to fracture when Dean starts questioning the morality of Mujin's actions. Gutgun and Han don't agree with Dean's sentiments. More than that, Han goes on a mercifully quick recap of Mujin's rise to power, which simply all boils down to his point, that he loves Mujin and expresses his full support for whatever the world government does. Back in his throne room, Mujin and Q exchange some pleasantries. Q then asks Mujin how that whole assassination attempt on Kim went down, to which the world president says that they lost a couple of Generation X members, namely Lee and the twins. One was injured, and the world government lost about 2,300 agents in the process. And when Q asks Mujin if these casualties at least gave them results, Mujin admits that Kim is still alive and kicking somewhere out there. The world president then pretty much tells Q that he could have killed Kim if he wanted to. But Q knows better than that. He's well aware that there's still no way he could take out someone like Kim. In fact, Q admits that he just got lucky during their previous bout. 9 times out of 10, Kim would definitely kick his butt. Q then changes the subject and tells the world president that his real target is actually Mujin. To make this long story short, the two men get into a contest of egos to see who beats who. They even get into a quick altercation that ends as soon as it begins. And soon enough, Mujin gets God of High School's plot moving again when he asks Q if he brought the thing he asked for. Q presents him with a small chest. Mujin opens it and his eyes light up, which makes Q wonder if that whole Kim assassination attempt was just a front to get this item. Q chastises Mujin for wasting resources on that Kim mission, but Mujin reassures him that everything's going according to his plan. Since Team Generation X gained experience and he found the singularity during this whole debacle, Mujin tries to explain things further, but Q doesn't have the time for it. So he cuts off the world president and demands that he hold up the end of their bargain, namely whatever is inside that chest in exchange for Mujin not messing with Q's family and company. Mujin says he'll stay true to his word. Q accepts and leaves. But before doing so, Q asks Mujin why he wants the thing inside the chest. Mujin gets all cryptic and tells him it's not about why he needs it, but how he's going to use it, whatever that means. We then get the reveal that the chest Q gave him contains Mori's Monkey King crown called Loop of Binding. Somewhere else, Mori and Dewi arrive in front of the World Government building where thousands of people are currently protesting. God of High School then shows a flashback from the time Mujin initially became part of the Six after he beat one of its former members, some guy named Chalban Na. We then see early glimpses of Mujin's megalomania here when he told himself that he'd one day rule over all the other members of the Six. But then, as we all know by now, Jin Taijin gave him a thorough spanking somewhere down the line. From there, Mujin starts having visions of Ultio, and we soon find out that this has all been a dream that Mujin's having inside his bedroom. Mujin wakes up and starts recapping all the devious crap he's been doing lately. Then the world president suddenly reveals this hidden soft side when he realizes that his old pal Q doesn't want anything to do with him, while another one of his former original allies, C, is now a corpse. All this makes Mujin realize that he's now alone. Meanwhile, the protesters in front of the world government building start to panic when they recognize Mori and Dewi approaching. Mujin makes an announcement to evacuate the area and places the city on DEFCON 1. Soon enough, an entire unit of world government troops led by a guy named Tia-kun are deployed to deal with our two heroes. We even get a bit of background about Tia-kun, who's revealed to be the winner of the 7th God of High School tournament. And by the looks of it, he seems like a good guy, given how he leads his men by example. Tia-kun's unit soon comes face to face with Daewi and Mori and gives out the orders to destroy their enemies. The battle ends as soon as it starts when Daewi makes each and every world government soldier in the area bend the knee with his gravity 3x ability. Fair play to Tia-kun, because he brute forces his way to get back on his feet only to be forced on his knees again. He realizes Daewi and Mori can easily squash them like bugs, so Tia-kun pleads with our heroes to spare his men. Daewi does them one better by simply trapping Tia-kun and his unit inside one of Heitei's bubbly bubbles. Meanwhile, Mujin gets ready to join the fray. He gives out the order to activate their Wi-Fi in spite of his people's protests to just stay behind for fear that using his powers might be too much for Mujin's body to handle. But Mujin insists on joining the battle, telling his underlings that the least he can do is seal off Daewi's powerful sage abilities. He tells his people to activate their borrowed power canceller, but immediately learns that it's going to be impossible, since they don't have enough Wi-Fi stations to do this after Mori and Dewi sabotage several of these facilities. Meanwhile, Mori and Dewi just remain chill as they approach the borrowed power canceller. Mori wonders if they should go and help out Kim back in New Korea, but Dewi reassures him that the old man can deal with things there by himself. Our heroes then effortlessly level the entire borrowed power canceller facility, which prompts Mujin to personally confront our heroes. However, P sedates the world president because she knows they can't afford to lose Mujin at this juncture. P then assumes command of the world government, telling everyone that Mujin's safety is their top priority before giving the order to activate their emergency defense system. While this is happening, Mori and Dewi are just about to enter the world government building. Mori asks his best friend if they really should take out this place first, to which Dewi explains that yes, they should. That's because he knows that the biggest threat they're facing right now isn't Mujin or the world government's army, it's the public's perception of them. As such, they plan on swaying public opinion by using the world government's headquarters to record an announcement telling everyone that they're not the real enemies. Shortly after, our two heroes do this, but it doesn't exactly work. Suffice it to say that most people think that our heroes are still a couple of menaces. Still, Mori and Dewi proceed with recording their message with the help of a couple of world government employees sympathetic to our heroes' cause, telling the people of the world government that the real bad guy here is none other than Mujin. They finally finish taping after a whopping 2,563 takes. But our heroes have no time to rest, because a long-range energy beam suddenly shoots at Daewi and Mori. Daewi manages to block the attack, and we soon find out that Ipio has begun the operation to take out our heroes. Right now, he's with other executives like Kyoichi and One, taking point and explaining the first basic principle of fighting the Monkey King's troops, attacking from a distance. Meanwhile, in the city, world government agents get to their designated spots to set up a battery of long-range attacks directed at our heroes. In turn, Daewi and Mori get the camera crew who helped them earlier to safety before climbing to the building's rooftop where hundreds of world government agents are about to shoot them with energy beams. Daewi deduces that they're going up against Ipio, as our heroes dodge enemy fire and make their way down to the streets. They're soon blocked by another unit of world government operatives, while Ipio tells the other executives the second basic principle of fighting the Monkey King's troops, separating him from the Jade Emperor. Ipio stresses that they're currently engaged in a war of attrition against their enemies, so splitting up our heroes is their best chance of winning this skirmish. Back in the war zone, Daewi and Mori are just about to charge at the opposing forces when some random lady holding a baby suddenly appears between them. Mori jumps in to rescue the civilians, while Daewi counters their enemies' projectiles with natural force inertia. Daewi, however, is surprised when he notices that the enemy's attacks are able to change their trajectory. Daewi's hit but remains undamaged. The problem is that he's been separated from Mori, and all our hero sees is a hole in the ground where Mori and the civilians were just standing. Somewhere else, Ipio receives word that their forces have managed to split up their targets. He declares that their first mission is complete and should now aim for their weak point. Meanwhile, Mori and the civilians he rescued find themselves in the middle of the sewers where another unit of world government agents are waiting to ambush our hero. On the other hand, Ipio reveals that Mori and Dewi's critical weakness happens to be their tendency to subscribe to non-violence. At the same time, it's revealed that the lady Mori just rescued is actually a world government operative, and she now has our hero in her grasp. As for Ipio, he clarifies that Mori and Dewi never kill regardless if their enemies use cheap tricks. With Mori seemingly trapped, the world government agents in the sewers blast him with their attacks. Meanwhile, an executive asks Ipio about their chances of winning this battle, to which he replies that they've got about an 8 to 10% win rate. Back in the sewers, the lady is terrified when she sees that the entire unit of agents that just attacked Mori have all been taken out, while Ipio clarifies that their main goal here is just to buy time. The lady in the sewers drops her baby, which is revealed to be nothing but a doll. She nearly wets her pants when Mori spots her. Still, Mori doesn't murder this spy and instead allows Haiti to trap all world government agents in a few bubbly bubbles. Meanwhile, Ipio tells his people that he knows they don't stand a chance against their enemies in a direct confrontation, so their only option is to use any trick they can muster to at least hold them off. Ipio then gives the order for all the other world government executive squads to mobilize and go out to the field, while Dewi runs along the city streets as he dodges enemy fire. Ipio reveals that Dewi might be powerful, but his one weakness is his gas tank. Simply put, Dewi doesn't have the stamina for a long drawn-out fight, so he tells his operatives to make the Jade Emperor use up as much of his powers as possible. Meanwhile, Dewi spots a couple of civilians about to be toppled by a collapsing building. He uses his sage's rope to rescue them, and at that point, our hero realizes that Ilpio's using these cheap tactics to take them out. Dewi soon spots Ilpio's lair. On the other hand, Ilpio's confident that there's no way Dewi's going to reach them, since the city's layout is like a maze that traps you deeper the harder you try to escape. But Dewi's not playing this little game. Instead, he just bursts through any obstacle in his way and makes a beeline towards Ilpio's lair. All the while, Dewi tells himself that he knows Ilpio's own weakness, that he's too rational. Curiously though, a random man and a kid suddenly run towards Dewi and give him a hug. Ipio gets confident knowing that Dewi isn't the type of guy who would kill innocent civilians, as the buildings around the Jade Emperor suddenly start to crumble. Dewi then has a quick flashback where we see him training and having self-esteem issues about whether he truly deserves to inherit Okwang's powers. Meanwhile, we find out in the present that our guy has just rescued the two touchy civilians who hugged him earlier. Dewi tells him to find shelter before leaving, and it's then revealed that these two scumbags are another couple of world government agents in disguise. The thing is, Dewi's not an idiot. He knows what's up, so he goes back to these two and traps him in a bubbly bubble before going his own way. Meanwhile, Ipio reiterates the order to force Dewi to use his power so that they could empty his gas tank. Somewhere else, Samuel shoots one of his magic arrows at Mori. Mori's able to block it, but the arrow still grazes him, which leads to our hero to realize the arrow changed trajectory before he caught it. Mori soon finds himself in a bit of a pickle when several executives like 4, Kyoichi, F, and a whole bunch of other high-level world government operatives ambush him with their respective borrowed powers and national treasures. Their concerted attack hits so hard that the underground shelter where civilians have evacuated threatened to collapse right on top of their heads. Thankfully, Dewi arrives just in time to use his reverse gravity ability on the entire structure and rescue the people. He tells the civilians to escape while he holds up the collapsed building. The problem is, Ipio accounted for this circumstance and has just sent in a squad of agents to ambush Dewi, knowing that he can't fight back while holding up the ceiling. Above ground, Mori's trapped in between the jaws of Kyoichi's Yamada no Orochi. Meanwhile, Ipio gives his men the order to attack Dewi while they still can, and he starts to think that he has the Jade Emperor on the ropes. What Ipio doesn't know is that our heroes have come up with a secret plan of their own. Remember those two guys who helped them record their message earlier? We find out that Mori and Dewi tasked them with broadcasting live news footage of everything that's happening right now. Because of this, citizens of the world government are able to witness Mori and Dewi's efforts in saving them, while simultaneously learning that the world government is using its citizens as cannon fodder for our heroes. Ipio panics when he finds out about the broadcast and desperately calls for his men to terminate it. But it's too late. The people have already seen what our heroes wanted them to see. Back in the collapsed underground shelter, Dewi smirks when he finds out their gambit has worked. Ipio tells his men to execute the Jade Emperor right then and there, while Dewi is unable to use his sage powers. But Ipio's forgetting one thing here. Dewi doesn't need borrowed powers to kick butt. In fact, he easily eliminates his attackers with his original skill, Kyokushin Karate. Dewi takes out several agents with his Fist of the Black Turtle, which terrifies the surviving enemy forces. Our hero then reveals that he actually did some training of his own while he was coaching Mori. Specifically, Dewi came up with his own version of having Yoi inside your ear. Except in his case, we learn that Dewi has been constantly using his gravity 30 times ability on himself to help improve his overall speed and reflexes. Ipio's too late when he realizes this, as Dewi gets rid of even more world government agents with a single hit from his Kyokushin Karate 4 Guardians, White Tiger technique. Right after that, Executive Team Latin, which touts itself as an anti-Jade Emperor squad, arrives to try and deal with our hero. Well, they should have chosen a humbler name for their unit, because Dewi easily dispatches them with a quick 4 Guardians, the ultimate Blue Dragon technique. In fact, not only does Dewi wreck these executives, he even manages to unintentionally help Mori free himself from Yamada no Orochi's fangs in the process. Ipio and his men start to panic when it dawns on them that Dewi isn't even using any borrowed power to take out their agents. It's just pure uncut martial arts. Back on the battlefield, one gets an instant man crush on Dewi when he finds out that our hero is sticking to their whole no-kill policy, instead leaving their opponents barely alive. Meanwhile, on the streets, Mori and Yamada no Orochi are engaged in a high-speed chase. Our hero escapes through a building and even manages to rescue a couple of civilians in the process. He then finds an opening and smacks Yamada no Orochi to death. At the same time, the camera crew they assigned to do the live broadcast continues to do their duty. They're suddenly sniped by a world government operative named Executive J, but Ipio and his men are shocked when they find out the camera crew survived with the help of Heitei's Bubble. Ipio begins to wonder how these two men were able to use Heitei's abilities. More than that, how did Mori manage to use the same technique earlier in the sewers? We soon find out that our heroes have stolen the few Wi-Fi routers from the world government, which they then distributed among themselves. This allows them to share their borrowed powers, explaining how the camera crew was able to use Heitei's Bubble. The two reporters are in shock when they realize that someone just tried to assassinate them. This just gives our heroes even more ammo to sway public opinion about Mujin and the world government's super shady tactics. Meanwhile, Mori admits that Mujin might be a grade A scumbag, but stuff like Ahan's nanotreatment and the Wi-Fi routers prove to be helpful things if used the right way. His musings are interrupted when Samuel shoots him with another one of his arrows, but Mori's able to counter it with Mori-jin Original Railgun version, sending the arrow back to its owner. In turn, Samuel shoots the deflected arrow with another one to defend himself from the projectile. He then transforms into his Hercules form and summons the staff of Hercules to try and start some static with Mori, but our hero easily destroys his mythical weapon with the same arrow. This makes Samuel realize that he still hasn't closed the gap between their skills and basically shows Mori how insecure he is about it. In reply, our hero tells Samuel that he could have killed them all with a single sneeze if he was still in his prime. Mori goes on to tell him to shut up about Samuel's complaints about natural talents and fairness, because as Mori puts it, he had to work his butt off in practice every day ever since he got weaker because of Mujin. Afterwards, reinforcements arrive and link up with Samuel to deal with our hero. The long and short of it is that a bunch of high-level executives like Samuel, Kyoichi, and F have formed Team Alphabet to take out our hero. They simultaneously summon their borrowed powers and lunge at him, and we learn that each of these executives still buy into Mujin's fake story about Mori being the enemy. But if you're looking for an epic clash here, well, too bad, because Mori easily gets rid of them with his martial arts. Our boy doesn't even go for any special name techniques, just pure unfiltered butt kicking. Mori deals with Team Alphabet without so much as breaking a sweat, but he's then ambushed by an energy blast from one of the world government's satellites. But Dewi proves that he and his best friend's battle chemistry is off the charts when he protects Mori from the energy blast with a natural weak force barrier. Ipio tries to hit Mori with another energy blast from the satellite, but our hero takes it out with one of Samuel's stray arrows. Meanwhile, the world government makes an announcement that they're now engaged in an open war against our heroes. They mobilize and arm their entire military and arrive at our hero's location not long after that. Mori and Dewi find themselves surrounded by an entire army of world government agents. Dewi surmises that it's going to take them more than a week to defeat all of these scrubs if they stick to their no-killing policy. On the other hand, Mori tells his best friend that they're going to get the job done in half an hour, and when Dewi asks about their no-killing code, Mori answers by saying they'll keep upholding it, except this time, they're just going hard enough to keep their enemies barely alive. In other words, our heroes won't kill their enemies, but they sure have no problem putting them in a coma at this point. God of High School's next issue opens with another retread of Mujin's whole anti-Monkey King propaganda after the Ragnarok War. We don't learn anything new here, so let's just keep ahead to the present day where we find out the sequence happens to be just a memory that a random world government agent is having while he and his squad try to gun down our heroes with weapons called Mass-Produced National Treasures K2, Borrowed Power Firearm. At the same time, Mujin's ultimate goal dawns on Mori, and it's a realization that the series has been repeatedly hammering down in our heads since the end of Ragnarok's storyline. That Mujin wants the world to abide by human centrism, the idea that everything should be of the humans, by the humans, and for the humans. Meanwhile, Mori and Dewi each activate their respective suits of armor, namely the Monkey King's dragon armor suits and the Sage's robe, and proceed to fling about 900 world government agents hundreds of feet up in the air. Dewi then activates his gravity force ability to send them crashing down to the ground face first. A random government agent witnesses this and asks our heroes if they've denounced their no-killing code. But Mori and Dewi reiterate that they didn't kill these scrubs, they're keeping them barely alive. From there, the two best friends get cheeky, as Dewi tells Mori that they're going to bring Mujin's whole city back to the Stone Age. The Jade Emperor summons his powerful natural force ability and prepares to drop it on the entire area. Somewhere else, Ipio snoops around a computer to try and access information about the team that developed Mujin's nano-treatment machines in hopes of saving the Generation X kids from X syndrome. A flashback reveals that Ipio has been digging into this for some time now, but he has yet to find a single member of the nanomachine development team willing to work with him. On the other hand, it's here we also learn that Mujin has added another crime against humanity to his list of felonies when he monopolized the nanotreatment schematics, which is a violation of world health regulations. We also get the reveal that Ipio has approached Beck for help in finding the cure for X syndrome. And it's here we learn the reason why he's been looking for members of the nanomachine development program this whole time. As Beck puts it, he was able to hack and reverse engineer the nanomachine when he treated Ahan. But mass-producing the cure is an entirely different story. See, the entire nanomachine production line is under Mujin's control. Beck says he's been able to build a new factory to emulate the treatment, but that's going to take a couple of years. On top of that, they're going to need another 3 or 4 more years just to build the treatment facility's infrastructure. However, Beck told Ipio that they could significantly reduce their development time if they managed to recruit an engineer or researcher that worked on the original nanomachine project. The problem is, all the former nanomachine developers he found didn't want anything to do with the project anymore. In the present, Ipio accepts the fact that he has no choice but to seek Mujin's help to find a cure for Syndrome X. Later, Ipio gives his wife, Sunga, a call to check on the Generation X kids they're taking care of. Sunga informs her husband that she ran a full diagnostics on every newborn baby for the last 3 months and found out that over 30% of them are Generation X babies. Sunga surmises that it's only a matter of time before this new race of humans supplants the old one. She goes on to express her fears about these more genetically evolved kids, knowing that they'll someday be way stronger than their predecessors. In fact, Sunga's not even sure they can technically refer to these Generation X babies as technically human. Their conversation ends when she shares her concerns in case these Generation X mutants find themselves at odds with the original human race somewhere down the line. Somewhere else, Mujin wakes up to find out that he's been transported to his bunker aboard a world government convoy. He asks P what's going on with his constituents, to which we get a flashback where we see Ipio debriefing P about the steps they should take to ensure Mujin's continued survival. We learn Ipio told P that the world government forces can only delay Daewi and Mori for about 2 to 3 days at most, which necessitated Mujin's ongoing evacuation to the bunker. In the present, P wonders if she made the right call leaving command of the world government to Ipio, thinking that he might screw them over. However, Mujin reassures his trusty executive assistant that there's no way Ipio is going to betray them, since he's well aware that he needs Mujin to find a permanent cure for the X syndrome. Meanwhile, Ipio gets this crafty smile now that he knows he's basically been given the keys to the kingdom. Back on the road, Mujin's transport truck is all of a sudden hit by a powerful force from outside. It tips over, and we immediately learn that none other than Kim has just laid waste to his entire convoy. Kim stands in front of the highway telling Mujin to come out because it's time for a scuffle. And not just any ordinary duel either. Kim wants a good old-fashioned fistfight. Meanwhile, Dewi finally launches his powerful natural force and directs it toward the ground right underneath their feet. World government agents stationed at the command center start to lose their minds thinking that our heroes are about to breach their building. But Ipio tells them to calm down because even the Monkey King and the Jade Emperor would take at least 2 to 3 days before they reach this place. We then find out that the command center is located deep underground, and Dewi has just blown a straight path towards it with his most recent move. And as our 2 heroes stare at the abyss below them, Dewi tells his best friend that they'll find what they're looking for when they reach the world government's command center. While this is happening, Ipio hands one of his men, a dude named Agent Smith, an important package that he's meant to deliver to someone we don't know yet. Above ground, the entire world government armed forces get into position and surround our 2 heroes. Mori gets excited that he and Dewi get to mow down thousands of opponents, though he does remark that there's one person missing to make this the perfect party, Mira. Shortly after, Ipio gives out the order to fire their anti-power borrower mechanized forces weapons. One of his men tells him this will lead to tons of friendly fire casualties, but Ipio insists. The entire world government armed forces unleash their ordnance right at our heroes. In the meantime, Dewi tells Mori to go ahead underground while he deals with the enemy units here. After all, his skill set is more suited for fighting against entire armies. So, Mori uses his Mori-Jin original railgun technique to make a beeline towards the command center, cutting his travel time by an absurd amount. At the same time, Dewi relishes the opportunity to destroy the world government's army with just a flick of his index finger. Mori reaches the command center moments later, while we learn from world government agents that 1/3 of their ground units above ground have been annihilated. Ipio's starting to worry now. Somewhere else, Beck continues his research on Mujin's arm. He finally cracks it and finds out what Mujin has been after this whole time. We don't get any payoff on this just yet, only that Beck is gearing to tell Mori about his findings as soon as possible. In another place entirely, specifically the West, Mandoc watches news about the ongoing war at the world government's capital. He takes this opportunity to gather his Neo-Nox forces to attack and finally destroy his eternal rival, Mujin. Meanwhile, Ipio checks the tracker he placed on the world president and can't believe where Mujin is headed. But again, still no payoff yet, because the story then shifts to Dewi, who's currently busy flatlining more world government soldiers. They even try to drop an entire plane on the Jade Emperor, but he easily crushes the aircraft like a soda can. Dewi manages to rescue an unnamed world government agent along the way. But he soon comes across a squad of soldiers known as the World Government Assassination Squad, Shadow, which happens to be made up of nanomachine-enforced operatives. Dewi's ready to throw down with these goons, but he doesn't bother wasting his energy when he notices that the satellite that Mori shot with an arrow earlier is about to crash right in front of them. The satellite drops right on top of the entire assassination squad's heads, while Dewi remains unscathed. Underground, Mori has just laid out hundreds of world government operatives at the command center and now has come face to face with Ipio. The two waste no time and instantly clash with each other, with Mori transforming to his original form while Ipio uses his nine-tailed fox form. Flashback to mere moments ago, and we find out that the men under Ilpio's command actually adore him as a leader. This becomes even more apparent when he gives out the order for everyone in the command center to evacuate, which his men refuse to do, because to Ilpio's subordinates, they're with him until the end. They hear Mori crashing down a second later. So being the good leader that he is, Ipio knocks out his men with well-placed karate chops to the nape so that they wouldn't get involved in whatever destructive confrontation he has with Mori. In the present, Mori screams for Ipio to stand down. As our hero puts it, he has no reason to fight the nine-tailed fox. All Ipio has to do is hand over Mujin to him, but Ipio doesn't listen to this and instead commits to scuffling with our hero. Ipio goes for his Hyake Yagyo technique, while Mori busts out a Dangyuti kick. The techniques cancel each other out when they clash. Not too far away, Team Latin's Executive 4 becomes aware of the ongoing duel between Mori and Ipio. Of course, he provides backup right away, which comes in the form of a projectile that hits Mori right in the back of the head. In turn, Mori gets rid of the distraction when he launches Yui right at Executive 4 and pins him on the wall. Mori goes back to tussling with Ipio, and the nine-tailed fox soon realizes that fighting him here is pointless. So Ipio summons the gigantic creature known as Sixth Owner Prowltriller. Prowltriller bursts out of the command center until half of its body emerges above ground, which terrifies the remaining survivors in the area. On the other hand, Mori tries to steal control of Prowltriller from Ipio by reminding the beast that he was the one who beat him all the way back during the events of the Great War. But the creature doesn't listen and instead launches an energy beam that slices what remains of the cityscape. Meanwhile, in New Korea, we learn that Ahan and Shaochen have entered the construction industry as they help its citizens erect a building in the middle of the city. The foreman calls for a snack break, and the people of New Korea soon learn what's happening at the world government's capital when they watch the news. While this is happening, Paul's mom is inside their new home. The kid approaches her and asks if she's working on some blueprint before acting like a little smarty pants and pointing out her mom's errors in the schematics. Paul's mom is proud that she has a smart boy and apologizes to him for telling Paul that he wasn't chosen by God due to his lack of borrowed powers. She then receives a call from someone and tells the other person on the line that she's almost finished creating her blueprints. Back at the construction site, we find out that the building Ahan and the other construction guys are working on looks uncannily similar to Beck's planned nanomachine treatment building complex. Back at Paul's apartment, his mom tells the other person on the line for help, stating that her upcoming designs are the best she's ever done. Somewhere else, the unnamed former members of the world government's nanomachine development project listen to news reports about what's going on at the capital. Of course, in true God of High School fashion, reports blurt out that this might be the end of the world. Somewhere else, Agent Smith finally hands over the package Ipio gave to another operative, who says that this MacGuffin could end both of their careers, thanks to the World Security Act. But Agent Smith is loyal to a fault, so he says he's going to obey his superior's orders. Besides, Agent Smith doesn't see the point in any sanctions he might get, given that the world might be burnt to ashes soon enough. From there, the other guy tells his people to send the contents of Agent Smith's package to the reporter on the scene, the same camera crew that's been working with Daewi and Mori since they broke into the world government building earlier. Meanwhile, Mori and Ilpio's duel gradually gets more heated with each passing second. They clash once more, trading blows at close range. Executive 4 can tell that the two warriors are evenly matched while he dangles where Mori left him earlier. Above ground, Prowltriller continues to wreak havoc, but the gigantic beast gets the wind knocked out of it when Daewi hits it with his trademark fist of the Black Turtle technique. Things escalate when Mori and Ilpio's duel goes from the underground world government command center to the skies of the city. Meanwhile, the trusty camera crew continues to do live coverage of the ongoing catastrophe. More importantly, though, the reporter knows that Prowltriller is being controlled by the world government right now. All of a sudden, the reporter receives a notification from his phone. Back in the middle of the battlefield, Ipio summons his eighth tail and continues throwing down with Mori. We soon learn that the notification the reporter received happens to be the same package Ipio tasked Agent Smith to deliver earlier, which contains sensitive information about Mujin. Specifically, it's a packet that exposes each and every shady dealings that Mujin has done all throughout his regime, including but not limited to embezzlement, bribery, and the procurement of illegal funds. On top of that, the reporter lets everyone know about Mujin's illicit partnership with the recently deceased Jonas Yonif and the part the world president played in the slander and murder of various world leaders. But the most damning bit of information is when the reporter reveals that Mujin orchestrated the attack at the large protest. Meanwhile, back at Mujin's location, we find out that the world president is currently taking a much-deserved beating from Kim. On the other hand, P gets livid when she hears the latest news. P knows this information couldn't have come from anyone else but Ipio, which makes her wonder if he's given up on finding a cure for the kids with X syndrome. A flashback reveals that Ipio also coordinated with one of the members of the nanomachine development project, a guy named Dr. Schmitz, and it turns out the nine-tailed fox cut a deal with this guy, that Ipio would release the dirt on Mujin in exchange for his cooperation in delivering his research data about the nanomachine treatment. In the present, Schmitz holds up his end of the deal as he uses his Wi-Fi connection to deliver his nanomachine treatment data to Paul's mom. Paul's mom monologues about how Wi-Fi was developed to overcome the limits to the ways people could use borrowed power. But more to the point, she receives Schmitz's research, which brings Ipio and the rest of our heroes closer to developing a permanent cure to the X syndrome without the need for Mujin's cooperation. Another flashback then confirms that yes, the building Ahan and the construction guys in New Korea are working on is the nano treatment facility that Ilpio's been planning to establish. Even better, New Korea proves itself as a proper sanctuary for non-borrowed power users when Ipio reveals that most of the people working on this project are non-borrowed power refugees that migrated to New Korea. More than that, we find out from Beck that the combined efforts of these productive refugees guarantees that construction of the New Korea nano treatment facility will be finished much sooner than his initial estimate. Instead of taking about 5 to 7 years, the whole thing can become operational in half a year. In the present, Ipio knows that his ultimate plan is about to come to its conclusion, even adding some shade by saying that Mujin was an idiot for solely relying on borrowed power users this whole time. With that, Ipio begins to launch the final phase of his plan, to allow Mori to completely destroy the myth Mujin created when he first installed himself as president of the world 17 years ago. Nearby, Ilpio's loyal subordinates recover and attempt to provide their boss with some backup. Ilpio sees this and pretty much crafts an apology in his head for tricking every unwitting world government agent to become part of his scheme. In any case, the final step in Ilpio's plan involves having Mori kick his butt publicly, which in turn would cement the Mujin and the world government's downfall. The long and short of it is that Ilpio's playing the martyr card. He's painting himself as the villain to make Mori and our other heroes look good in the eyes of the masses. And at the moment, Ilpio's about to reach his ultimate goal, as Mori launches a boulder at him. All he has to do now is just stand there and take it like a man. The problem is, Ipio ends up making the stupid choice of allowing this farce of a duel to drag on after he gets hyped seeing Mori bust out his martial arts moves. It also doesn't help that one just blocked the boulder for Ipio, because the man really believes in Ipio. On the other hand, Mori reveals that he knows about Ilpio's grand plan all along. All priorities fall by the wayside when the two warriors decide to reset and have a proper duel after Mori invites his big brother to a rematch of their fight from 17 years ago. Ipio then tells himself that he'll fight as the world government's leader to honor all of his subordinates, and with that, Mori and Ipio take their places to have their climactic showdown. We then go to a flashback from before Kim put hands on Mujin. We learn that Team Generation X is also part of Mujin's convoy. By this point, each of these kids has become a mopey teenager after getting into disagreements about their loyalties to the world president. Right now, Dean broods and starts to question whether he and the other Generation X kids are actually human. However, his musings are suddenly interrupted when Kim wrecks the transport truck Mujin is on. Dean tries to head out of their own truck to confront Kim, but they immediately receive a message from Mujin telling the team to go to the coordinates he sent them. Back inside Mujin's wrecked convoy, P tries to stop him from confronting Kim, reminding him that he hasn't kept up his end of their bargain just yet. So Mujin absolutely cannot die right now. Mujin nearly collapses all of a sudden, which worries P, but the man reassures her that he's alright and he hasn't forgotten his promise. Ultimately, Mujin sets out to meet Kim outside the convoy. From there, Yongji Park fills out the page count by having P basically provide the tale of the tape for Mujin in Kim's upcoming duel. P's monologue doesn't add anything to the story, but all you should know is that these two dudes aren't in tip-top condition, what with Mujin's recent arm transplant and Kim's wounds from his battle against Team Generation X. God of High School's plot finally gets back on track when Kim smacks Mujin right in the face, signaling the beginning of their scuffle. Back at the capital, Mori and Ipio get into it at close range. They're evenly matched at first, but Ipio comes up with the goofy schoolyard tactic of pulling your opponent's shirt over their head to temporarily restrict Mori's movements, leaving him open to get in a few hits on our hero. Mori eventually recovers, and you can easily tell these two old buddies are enjoying the sparring session. Somewhere else, Daewi reaches the world government's secret national treasure armory and finds the thing that he's been looking for. Meanwhile, Mujin's life flashes before his eyes while he takes a solid beating from his old 6 teammate. We soon see the world president a bit worse for wear, as he gives himself a pep talk to give him the juice to continue fighting. On the other hand, Kim hasn't even broken a single bead of sweat yet. Our guy just has his hands up, waiting for Mujin to make the next move. Mujin tries to mount an attack against Kim, but he ends up throwing up in front of the dude. Kim figures out Mujin's sick, but there's just no quitting in the world president, as he gathers himself once more and clashes with his opponent. Back in the city, Mori and Ipio treat us to a nice close quarters sequence as the two boys find themselves on even footing once again. Ipio busts out his sine wave ability, while Mori uses his renewal step technique. They soon get to another close quarters clash, and Ipio finally tips the tide of battle when he activates his ninth tail and catches Mori with his Samsu outer kick technique. Ipio nearly dashes Mori's face into the ground, but our hero manages to recover on the fly and counter and nearly hit Ipio with his foot. Mori mounts his own counterattack right after that. He's able to knock down Ipio with a sweep, but they find themselves on even ground right after. As is tradition with God of High School, the epic duel is interrupted by a flashback from one of the combatants. This time, Ipio remembers the time he came up with his grand plan and remarks on how bringing down the world government was harder than he initially thought. His trip down memory lane culminates with a memory that shows Daewi and Mori each expressing their resolve. In the present, Ipio's flashbacks allow him to express his relief over the fact that neither Mori nor Dewi has changed in the past 17 years. On the other hand, he does feel a bit guilty for messing with the world government agents under his command and making them think he was actually their ally. Of course, Mori has his own flashbacks too, and it doesn't help move the plot forward. Thankfully, it's a mercifully short one where he remembers that time when he and Dewi came up with the plan to hit the world government first before rescuing Mira from Mandoc and Neo Nox. In the present, Mori has an internal monologue about how he and Dewi initially believed that they could bring the world government down in less than half an hour, only to find out this mission was far more difficult than that. Mori gets to the point and expresses how impressed he is with Ipio, knowing that he was the reason behind this. We finally get back to the action, as Mori and Ipio find themselves in an all too familiar situation, one where they've ended up punching each other simultaneously. The two warriors go for the hard sell and hit each other in the face at the same time again. By this point, everyone around them's just slackjawed seeing these two master martial artists perform at the highest level. Hell, even Sunga is streaming this and can't help but get turned on seeing her husband go toe-to-toe with Mori. All the while, Mori uses his fight IQ and comes to the conclusion that he can minimize the stress on his body if he combines Ipio's silky smooth Samsu Tegyan moves with the movements of his renewal Taekwondo. The result is a technique called recoilless Goryo, in which Mori hits his big brother with a flying kick to the face. Ipio blocks this and Mori follows up with recoilless rapid fire. It seemed like Ipio blocked it again, but got nicked in his cheek. They won't be evenly matched for long though, because Mori then applies the recoilless buff on all of his moves during their next clash, allowing him to land several hard hits on Ipio. Somewhere else, Mujin takes it hard in the chin when Kim gives him one of his powerful uppercuts. Kim follows up with a cracking body shot before pummeling Mujin with a couple more punches. Back in the city, Ipio reminisces about Jin Taijin and expresses how proud he is of Mori for mastering renewal Taekwondo, which is made more impressive when you consider the fact that Ipio's doing this while in the middle of a beating. But here's the thing, Ipio has something right now that Mori doesn't, an entire audience of hype men cheering him on to continue fighting. At the same time, we see that Mujin just got the snot beaten out of him after being on the receiving end of Kim's fists. The story also seemingly plays the recent revelation about Mujin's corrupt dealings on loop while all of this is happening. Meanwhile, at the capital, Ipio gets a second win thanks to his subordinates' unending cheers. He then realizes that Mori has fully gone into recoilless mode. As our hero lunges at him, the climactic sequence is interrupted yet again by another flashback, this time showing Jin Taijin and Corporal Park's friendship. In the present, Mori and Ipio's duel finally reaches its conclusion when the two get into one last clash, each performing their own version of the reverse Jin Huichok kick. This time though, Ipio edges out Mori and cuts him up, knocking out our hero. Dewi then swoops in and teleports Mori away, but not before telling Ipio that this isn't over yet. On the other hand, Ipio ends up as the winner of his rematch with Mori. His subordinates celebrate the victory, while Ipio humble brags and says it looks like he lost. Somewhere else, we see Mujin on his knees, with Kim seemingly defeating him. And in the aftermath, the narrator says that Ipio's fight with Mori immediately made him the strongest candidate to become the next world president. We soon learned that our two heroes have teleported themselves on top of a building just above where Mori and Ipio had their duel. Mori regains consciousness and asks Dewi if their plan worked, to which his best friend says yes. A quick flashback reveals that Mori purposefully threw the fight and allowed himself to get hit by Ipio's attack during their final clash, which happens to be all part of our hero's plan to install Ipio as the new president of the world government. In the present, Dewi asks Mori if he's really okay with how things turned out. Mori replies by saying that all he wanted was to get his revenge on Mujin. He wants nothing to do with all this garbage about politics. On top of that, he knows that Ipio is the perfect guy to handle all the governance nonsense. On the ground, Mori and Ipio spot each other and smile, knowing that they've successfully overthrown Mujin's scummy regime. Ipio wastes no time and proceeds leading his remaining forces to prioritize rescuing the civilians that were affected by the chaos that ensued, vowing that he'll accept this new challenge as world president. The whole sequence ends with Ipio and Mori giving each other the thumbs up for playing each of their parts in the saga impeccably. The narrator then gives us the rundown on the losses that the world government accrued in what's now known as the Second Anti-Monkey King War. Suffice it to say that hundreds of thousands of military assets were crushed and civilians were wounded along the way. but there were absolutely 0 deaths that came from this confrontation. We soon find out that this war also exposed Mori and Dewi's existence to the rest of the world. On top of that, each of our 2 heroes are now pretty much classified as a couple of weapons of mass destruction on 2 legs. But the most important revelation here is that Ipio has now legitimately taken control of the world government, and his first order of business was to abolish all of Mujin's crappy laws aimed to discriminate against non-borrowed power users. Shortly after that, the Nine-Tailed Fox formed an alliance with the Mori and Dewi-controlled New Korea. Somewhere else, Mujin gets back on his feet and Kim notices that his arm's fixed again. This makes Mujin realize that the war at the capital is over now that his Wi-Fi connection is back. He checks with P, who basically tells him he's been impeached. Mujin accepts the loss and has a quick talk with Kim after. The gist of their conversation is that Mujin still keeps justifying his actions by claiming that Wi-Fi and Generation X will ultimately help humanity become better than gods themselves. Mujin eventually stops yammering and gets back to business when he tries to use his powers to drop a few broken down world government trucks on top of Kim's head. This distracts Kim, which then allows Mujin to summon a spear with a cybernetic arm. The 2 former 6 members get into one final clash. The story then moves the clock forward a bit and we find out that Kim and Mujin's climactic confrontation ended up creating a deep valley in the middle of the South Korean landscape. Our heroes take a much-deserved break from all the action that had just happened during the second Anti-Monkey King War. Mori is reunited with Ahan, and the siblings head out for groceries to go get ingredients for dinner. While this is happening, Xiao Chen gives her boss, Daewi, a hero's welcome when he returns to Nox's headquarters. But we all know by now that Daewi is not one for grand ceremonies, so he awkwardly makes his exit and dismisses his welcoming party. Meanwhile, we find out that Ahan has cooked up a nice spread for her brother. The 2 are having their dinner when Daewi enters and joins the meal. Meanwhile, Xiao Chen continues doting on Daewi by preparing her own dinner spread, but she soon sends Nox's chefs and servers away when she realizes that the man's already eating with his best friend in Ahan. So Xiao Chen goes for her next plan, which is presenting Peach to Mori. It fails horribly. For one, Xiao Chen laid Peach's makeup thick, making her look like a drag queen. For another, Peach's bashfulness gets the better of her the moment she lays her eyes on Mori when they enter the apartment. In any case, Xiao Chen and Peach join our hero's dinner and the group have themselves a sweet little impromptu get-together. We then get introduced to this as-yet unnamed goofy Nox follower who gets starstruck when he sees our heroes all in the same room. He instantly gets a crush on Ahan the second he sees her. Later, Daewi and Mori hang out on the apartment's balcony. Daewi asks his best friend how surprised he is that Mori decided to come home considering Mujin's still alive. In reply, Mori says that he realizes he doesn't want to put off being happy in the present. Oh, and make no mistake, our boy makes it clear that he's just resting up today. He'll head out tomorrow to look for Mujin and give the man what's coming to him. Mori's spiel about enjoying the present makes Daewi miss Mira. The story then transitions to the Witch of the West, as she chops off a poor NHA member's hand, presumably under Mandok's orders. The next day, Ahan puts in some work and we learn that she's already beaten Mori's sprint record from the God of High School tournament preliminaries. The 2 siblings have a heart-to-heart, and Ahan basically declares that her goal is to become strong enough to be worthy of fighting alongside her big brother. On the apartment's balcony, the goofy Nox follower watches Ahan and Mori. Peach arrives to tell him that Ahan has actually already earned her place alongside Mori, Daewi, and the rest of our heroes. Peach wonders if they tried as hard as Ahan's been working all this time. Somewhere else, up in the north, Sujan chows down on her favorite meal, hamburgers from Mickey D's. She asks her 2 trusted lieutenants, Ma Bora and Gyumji, for an update about Mansok. Now, if you guys don't remember, Sujan has sent Mansok on a mission during the early chapters of God of High School's final season. We finally learn the details of this assignment, as we find out that she actually sent Mansok to spy on Mandok and Neo-Nox. G reports that Mansok has recently discovered that Neo-Nox is going to focus on taking out Mujin. Next, Sujan asks her lieutenants for news about the world government, where she learns everything that's happened after the second Anti-Monkey King War. All these developments allow Sujan to let out a sigh of relief knowing that her old allies are more or less doing well. G then asks his boss if the wound she sustained from her fight with Mira is healing well. Sujan says she's all good and that she doesn't really mind losing to someone like Mira, but what she has issues with is losing to a clone, specifically Mori Jung. Sujan goes on to say that she can't believe Neo-Nox has been hiding Jung this whole time. Later, Daewi meditates in the middle of Mori's apartment. He ends up getting a headache after reminding himself of Mira, prompting his best friend to check on him. Daewi reveals that the artifact he took from Mujin's National Treasure Armory happens to be none other than Okwang's Cane of the Sage. However, he informs Mori that he's unable to activate the powerful tool, considering that he only has half of Okwang's powers, with the other half, also known as the body of the Jade Emperor, currently under Mira's possession. Daewi can't help but express his disappointment, because he's unsure if using the Cane of the Sage can help them bring Mira back to her normal self. But Mori gives his best friend a pep talk and says that they'll do everything they can to succeed in their quest. Besides, as Mori puts it, it's better to have the Cane of the Sage than nothing. On the other hand, Daewi proposes something to Mori after this. We don't get the details behind it, but what we know is Mori refuses to accept whatever it is Daewi has asked him. In any case, Mori thinks doing what Dewi suggested is suicide. He then wonders if Mira is actually stronger than Dewi these days, to which the Sage of the East says he's not really sure if he could beat Mira in a real fight. Their conversation gets serious when Mori asks Dewi what he'd do if worst comes to worst. That is, if it comes to a point where there's no way they could actually bring back Mira. Dewi gets the hint that Mori's actually asking him if he'd be able to take up Mira if the need arises. In reply, the Sage of the East deflects and instead jokingly tells his best friend that maybe he'll just run away. Mori's not convinced though. He knows that Dewi would probably choose to die than kill Mira if crap hits the fan somewhere down the line. Afterwards, Mori receives a call from Beck asking him to meet. Our heroes head over to the construction site, where Beck debriefs them about the upcoming nanomachine research facility in the middle of New Korea. And as Beck puts it, everything's going well. In fact, he calculates that the entire facility would become operational in a year and a half. We then get clear confirmation that Ipio and Beck spearheaded this project while Mori and Dewi were busy messing around with the world government. On top of that, we find out that Paul's mom is working as one of the construction project's leads, given that she's an architect. Even better, Young Jae Park finally remembers to give this woman a name, Joanne. Joanne uses Wi-Fi to coordinate with Schmidt and the other former members of the World Government Nanomachine Development Program. Schmidt even apologizes to Joanne for disregarding her opinions back when they worked together. On the other hand, another former researcher for the World Government Nanomachine Treatment Development Program reveals that the X syndrome arose from a genetic manipulation disorder expressed in the Generation X recessive gene. All that sci-fi mumbo-jumbo doesn't get any further explanation though, because this same guy just concludes his monologue by saying how he doesn't know how to feel about Mujin. Because on one hand, Mujin should be convicted of crimes against humanity. On the other hand though, he did save humanity with all the technological advancements he achieved. In any case, Joanne is confident that humanity will completely conquer the X syndrome soon. Back to Beck, he continues to explain that Ilpio's world government has hired borrowed power users and non-borrowed power users alike to reconstruct the Wi-Fi stations Mori and Dewi destroyed during their crusade. These stations would help quicken the construction of New Korea's nanotreatment facility. Beck praises Mori and Dewi for their efforts, but he does tell our heroes that using Mujin's Wi-Fi and nanotreatment technology might put him in a good light, which means that the scumbag might evade justice because of this. And with that, Beck asks our heroes a couple of questions. 1. Are they really sure they want to continue using these pieces of technology? And 2. Are they sure they really want to get rid of Mujin, considering that he might not be the absolute evil they think he is? Mori says yes to the first question. As our hero puts it, he and Dewi didn't start all this for others' approval anyway. As for his second question, well, to cut a long story short, it doesn't matter if Mujin did all these good things for the sake of the world. In Mori's own words, Mujin was a total dick to him, Dewi, and Mira. So yeah, he has to be held responsible for that. From there, Beck then asks the two best friends how they knew Ilpio was always on their side. Beck surmises that our heroes talked to Ilpio to organize this plan, but they reveal that, no, they just trusted Ilpio, knowing that the dude doesn't mind being painted as the villain to get the job done. And with that, Beck finally reveals the true purpose for calling our heroes here, as he tells Mori and Dewi that he's found where Mujin is headed. What's weird is that the disgraced former world president is making his way toward New Korea. To make things even more complicated, Beck surmises that Mira, Mandak, and the rest of their Neo-Nox forces are also headed there. Mori wonders why they all want to come to their sovereign territory, to which Beck reveals that both Mujin and Neo-Nox want to reawaken the god Tathagata, the same seemingly dead god that the Monkey King took out all those years ago. And if you remember, Tathagata's corpse is apparently on the dark side of the Earth's moon. The story arc ends with Beck explaining that he's been tracking Mujin's movements this whole time, which explains how he knows all of this. He learned that Mujin was recently in contact with someone in NASA. Going back several chapters before, we see this person presenting to Mujin the latest sample he asked for. What they found out is that the defeated Tathagata still lives on. And that is God of High School Final Season Part 3. What does everyone think is going to happen next? Will Mujin finally be defeated, or do we see a comeback from him trying to revive a fallen god? Also, can we see a war incoming from Neo-Nox? All we know for sure is more action is coming. Thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you in Part 4.